it's been great. We're really thrilled to have such a diverse audience, really from around the world. And we've had almost 400 people register, and a lot of people will be watching this later. But it's really great to have everyone who is here live, because our hope, Sebastian and I thought of this conference to build on one that Sebastian and the Herbal Alliance hosted last year that was about where your herbs come from. And we wanted to bring it, we thought originally just to the US audience, but really to the global audience. And so part of it is to build on that, and also really to build some sense of momentum and community among everyone who's thinking about where herbs come from, using herbs, how we can kind of mobilize our resources together. And so as part of that, I encourage you to keep your video on if you can. And that's why we're doing this as a meeting rather than a webinar, so that there's a chance for you to see everyone who's here and have some interaction in the chat.
No, baby, you're no bother at all. I love you. I love you.
We also have a really tight schedule, and so we will hope to have some time for a question or two for each speaker. But what I ask you to do is, if you have a question, enter it in the chat, and maybe others in the audience can answer it. Or if there's time, we'll add it to the end of the speaker. And then I also invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. Say where you're from, what your relationship with herbs and herbal medicine is. So I think that's the housekeeping things. What I wanted to invite you to do now is to take a moment and just don't look at your computer or your notifications, and just kind of settle into your chair. Close your eyes if you want, or turn your eyes down, and just feel your seat beneath you. Notice your breath. Just take a moment to arrive. Feel your breath into your belly. Let your breath out. And now think about the most recent medicinal plant you ingested. Could have been in a tea or a tincture or a capsule, or the spices you used for cooking. Taste that. Remember how it felt on your tongue, in your body. Remember that plant. And now consider what you know about how that plant arrived in your home. Did it come from your garden, a grocery store, a wholesale shipment? Follow it further from there and try to imagine where that product was made. Was it a factory, a home, a small shop? Can you picture it? What can you see? Is it dusty? Are there machines? If they're machines, what are they like? Are they clean or dirty? Is the room crowded or empty? What sounds do you hear? Who are the workers? Can you see their faces? Go further. How did the plants arrive at that place? Were they wrapped in plastic, in burlap, in a brown paper sack? Were the sacks new, or had they been used? And how did they get there? Did they come in a truck or a car? Who were the drivers? Can you see their faces? Now go back further, all the way back to the fields and the forest and meadow where the plant grew. Can you picture that landscape? What is the quality of the air, the soil? Is the place pristine, or by a road or a factory? Can you picture the farmers or wild collectors? Can you imagine their faces? Can you imagine their lives? Now stay with this plant, this place, and these people. Let them inside. Let in what you do and do not know, what you can and cannot imagine about their lives. Let that inside. And then bring it with you as you open your eyes and come back to the room. And now with that, I would like to turn it over and introduce Sebastian Pohl, co-founder of Pukka, Herbal Reality, and Herbal Alliance, to take it from here.
Thank you, Anne, for that lovely grounding welcome. And hello, everybody. Really great to be with you. I'm going to go straight into my presentation and share my screen. And anyway, I'm very glad to be with everybody to talk about this, such an important subject. We first did this conference about a year ago in the UK, actually, and we've done it because of the urgency that we find ourselves in the world. We know that we're in the middle of many challenges with the climate, many challenges with health, individually and socially, and as herbalists, as clinical practitioners, or those working in the herbal community and industry, it's like we're the repositories of this incredible knowledge, these amazing traditions and this wisdom. And it feels like there's an opportunity we have by joining together to find a way to bring better solutions to our community in terms of the sustainability of the plants we're using, the communities we work with. So one of the things that I was reflecting on before this talk is just how interconnected we are by the global value chain. Although we're in different countries, I'm in the UK today, many of you in America, across Europe, and even though we're in different countries, the herbs that we use and use in our clinics will be coming from similar places, and in a way we're all connected through this value chain. So just a few declarations of interest, which I think are in the bio. Now, the Herbal Alliance is a newly formed group that represents herbalists, professional associations in the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. And we really started 3 years ago in 2020 to help bring the professional associations together and work collaboratively for our community and our patients. There are actually 20 or so practitioner associations, professional practitioner associations in the UK and Ireland. And so it's an opportunity that we can represent and amplify the good work that those professional associations do already. And so recently we carried out a sustainability review through surveys, workshops, visits that Vicky Murray, who's going to speak later on in the conference, is going to give you more detail about. But through that conversation, we came up with this overview of what some guidelines might be for what might be our aspiration. So you can see it here. Sustainable herbal medicine ensures a viable future for herb growers, suppliers, and our profession. It is the essence of herbal medicine, ensuring successful clinical practice and sustaining health on the individual, societal, and ecological levels. So this can be achieved by the use of practitioner quality herbs that also demonstrably meet recognized environmental, social, and economic standards, so as to ensure they are available for the benefit of future generations, as well as promoting fairness and planetary health across everything we do. So I love this idea. It's the essence of herbal medicine, sustainability. We all want to practice sustainable healthcare. So this is some work we've put together as a North Star, if you like, for something we can work to. And so let's look at what that world is that we have. If that's the goal, what's the reality of the world we live in? So this is an image of a value chain or a supply chain. You can see down the bottom of the slide, all the F are the farms and the farmers, and they can be smallholders with half an acre to larger farms, and then all the W's are the wild collection spots, and then those feed into more collating suppliers, if you like, that are bringing together some of the different batches, and then those herbs will be shared with a partner somewhere along the line, maybe a few partners, depending on how long the value chain is. It can be between one and up to 15 or 20 people potentially in a value chain, perhaps more. So the partner, which can be in, depending where that is in which geographic region, but then you've got the manufacturers that are blending or testing and making the product, and then you've got us, the clinicians and the herbalists, and then you've got our customers or our clients. So it's a complex and, you know, full of potential for good and full of potential for risk in there. So the sort of value chain we want is one that benefits the environment, that trades fairly, and that really delivers safe and effective herbs that are affordable for everybody. And we know that, you know, just put a map here of where some herbs come from. Of course, there are, you know, many species, and they come from many different parts of the world. But you know, the herb trade has been going on for a very long time, many thousands of years, and cultures have built up around the collection and the growing of some herbs. But as we know, the majority of the species that we work with come from the wild, and there are various reports on what the numbers are. I'm sure there's some more experts today that will be talking about this, but Hugh has done State of the World Plants reports, IUCN, Medicinal Plant Specialist Group. But the way I think about it is approximately that there are 300,000 flowering species. About 10% of those 30,000 have got some background in medicinal and food. That number may be much larger as well. But there are about 3,000 herbs in global trade, and 300 of those are cultivated. So a lot coming out of the wild, but most of the volume cultivated. So 1 in 5 of those plants are threatened with some extinction, or their habitat loss is under pressure. This is the problem, really. You know, our climate and the temperature with the carbon accumulation in the atmosphere is pushing temperatures up, and you can see this band across the middle, you know, the equator zone in a way, and you know, above and below that a bit, with projections for if we go up to, you know, 3 degrees rise in temperature. These are the impacts on yields, and you can see some of the main supply areas in the world under heavy impact there. So we need to act. But you know, everybody's involved in buying herbs is a part of this issue in a way. This is a carbon analysis we did at Pucker, ongoing really, just to give you a snapshot of where some of the heavy carbon burdens may be. And you can see that farming really holds a lot of that impact, in an area that, depending on what sort of herbs we use, we can influence. So fortunately, many great academics and scientists are working on many of these issues and are revealing to us what some of the main issues are. This is some information. Luckily, we've got Joseph Brinkman speaking later, but this was authored with Wendy Applequist. And along with other papers, you know, looking at the impact that climate change is having on our materia medica. And we know that there are different shifts in the growth cycles of plants happening because of the climate shift with flowering. This is obviously leading to different risks in terms of the health of the plants, but also their nutritional content and also their secondary metabolites. You know, there seems to be some different variables there where sometimes those metabolites might be higher or lower, but either way, plants are moving, basically. Plants are literally on the march in some places, because so many species live at the edge, a bit like herbal medicine itself, I think, is at the edge of society in a way, isn't it? Legally, we're slightly at the edge of society in terms of patronage and inclusion in an integrative medical system, in some countries more than others, but also where herbs are grown, where they're harvested from, is also often in marginalized areas by marginalized communities. So I'm sure you'll all be familiar with many of these species and the challenge that there is in obtaining a sustainable and a fair supply. And so, you know, will these climatic conditions force us to change clinical practice? You know, it's happening now in a way. I'll just show you some pictures of some of these high altitude living on the edge plants. This is Jatamumsi. Can see growing high up in the Himalayas here in craggly spots, difficult to survive. Picoriza coroa, wonderful bitter. You know, both of these CITES listed, growing high up in the Himalayas again. Indian valerian, not used that much, I don't think, over in Western trade, but obviously used a lot in India. Sauceria lapa, mu xiang, in Chinese medicine, and kushta, a very good aromatic for the central qi and agni, but that's a CITES Appendix 1. And then some of our herbs used in the Western North American pharmacopoeia. That picture of the rhodiola on the right actually is in Scotland. And unfortunately, put on the CITES list later this year. So, on our watch, we are seeing various species being added to threatened and endangered lists. Of course, many responsible growers and suppliers have got appropriate value chains for these species now, but they're still very popular over the counter, and the demand from the herbal industry is significant. I thought it would be interesting to reflect back in terms of some of those challenges I was presenting there, in terms of the climate heating up and environments changing, and relating that to how we might diagnose a client and how we might work with someone individually. And so from the Ayurvedic point of view, perhaps this increase in heat, loss of ice, increase in sea temperatures could be seen as a pitta aggravation, as the moisture from the land is removed, and you get a depletion of the ojas, the inherent nutrition required for strong immunity and vitality. Ditto with Chinese medicine, a yin-yang imbalance leading to a Jing deficiency. And so we get this feeling of irritation going on within the climate and the ecosystems we're working in. And are there some treatments we could apply to that with the knowledge we've got as herbalists from the traditions and the insights that are held within these traditions? So we've got a few options that I'll come to, and it could be depending on what sort of herbs we get. So you can have cultivated or wild herbs, and that can be intercropped. The great movements of organic and regen farming are really looking at some interested intercropping, cover crops, wild harvesting, of course, essential. You get large farms, and you get smaller farms. So you get a big range of technical skills, of attention to detail, all of these things. So even though by species, many more plants come out of the wild, by volume, it's about a quarter of all the plants in trade. Still many millions of kilos, potentially billions. And that can be potentially a positive thing or a negative thing. It can lead to degradation if not done appropriately, or if the demand outstrips the resource and the care of the community's land. And it can also lead to some great conservation. And I'm sure we'll hear about Fair Wild a bit today, but it's the gold standard really in sustainable wild harvesting. And many of the great international NGOs, conservation NGOs, and experts contributed for many years.
Sebastian, just coming to a close now. Thanks. Oh, wait.
I think I've got another, anyway. Okay, I've got another 5
No,
minutes.
you have 10 more minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We're just dealing with this technical problem with letting more people into the Zoom, which is my fault. So, but you have 10 more minutes. I'm sorry.
No trouble. And so we know that sustainability really is an essential part of herbal medicine. The principles within, if you practice Ayurveda or follow any of that tradition, the idea of dharma is a word that means to uphold and to support, about fulfilling your life's destiny, your life's purpose. And we're all interested in sustaining our own health, as well as our clients' health and our community's health. And this pursuit in the Western tradition of preserving the vital force, I feel very apparent when you go around herb farms and you see their vitality when they're looked after properly. And of course, many of the principles that have been adopted by the organic movement and the environmental movement, I feel, are really at the heart of medicine and herbal values. So here at the bottom, you can see these principles are from IFOAM, the International Federation for the Organic Agricultural Movement. And they talk about the principle of health, the principle of ecology, the principle of fairness, and the principle of care. And I think those values are deeply embedded in our attempts as herbalists to lead a sustainable life. And we know that when you look after plants in a way as though they're in a wild setting, when they're potentially organic, which in some ways is semi-wild in terms of the way a plant has to, you know, defend and protect itself and thrive, you get this, you know, amazing research looking at the secondary metabolites in plants are significantly higher. So, you know, looking at some of the polyphenols here, you see this, you know, essential higher increase in colorful pigments and volatiles, etc., lower heavy metals. So, along with the principle of organic farming, wild collection, you know, we live in an agricultural world, don't we, of this sort of massive food system. And just looking what could be the antithesis of what we're trying to do as herbalists is this idea that in modern farming, there are, you know, many chemicals used in order to control the health of the crops, control them from disease. And lots of research is really coming out now looking at how some of the insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides used in farming are impacting on the microbiome in our digestive system, and therefore impacting on a whole cascade of health areas that I think, you know, evidence is showing is contributing to some of these issues around metabolic disorder, obesity, diabetes, etc., as well as other immune problems. There's just a sort of flash to contrast with what plants do, and this is a slide that Simon Mills, who I'm sure many of you know, one of the great herbalists in our community, has drawn this slide about how different herbs, the bitters and mucilages, the aromatics, etc., impact the relationship between our microbiome, the gut wall, and the metabolic pathways that the plant compounds go through and end up enhancing our microbiome overall. And there really is exciting insight there. So can we apply these appropriate treatment strategies to our herb sourcing? We talked about there being too much heat and pitta. So organic and regenerative farming, we know, work to cool and nourish the soil, build water retention, hold more carbon in the soil. We know that wild harvesting helps to rebuild ecosystem balance because of its harmonious relationship with the communities and the plants that you're harvesting, as well as the ones you want to leave behind. Just as an idea, you know, fair trade is a way that establishes interconnected relationships and greater integrity in value chains. And if you've got really good GACP, you can then have qualitative standards that enhance clinical efficacy. So we know that sustainability and quality are completely intertwined. And we've got all these worlds of GACP, GMP, GLP, you know, good agricultural collection practice, good manufacturing practice, good laboratory practice. And it's complex out there, and it is a challenge to get good quality herbs. But, you know, do we need to develop a good sustainability practice as a model for the whole industry? We know that there are great variations in the compound levels required in food grade herbs versus therapeutic, you could say medicinal grade herbs. So, for example, food grade chamomile's got 0.2 essential oil, pharmacopoeia grade chamomile 0.4% with an apigenin minimum, fennel 1% in food grade, 2% in the pharmacopoeia grade. So, you know, there's a need for this quality to be integrated with sustainability, and we have these incredible monographs and practitioner groups that are setting standards, helping us learn. And I really think that the quality standards and sustainability standards must be more integrated for us to have a practice, a community that can practice sustainably. So last couple of slides. Just some ideas really that we'll maybe go into more throughout the day. Perhaps you could think about them. You know, what can you do as individuals? Can we work with our professional association to have some sustainability standards? You know, does maybe your professional association already has them? In the UK, we're lucky to have the British Herbal Medical Association, and they've developed this herb mark for a herbal practitioner supplier scheme. So manufacturers are voluntarily approved to their standards. I think you have CGMPs in America, so it's slightly different, but, you know, are there some sustainability standards that can be embedded through your PA? we're very keen on developing a training module at the Herbal Alliance so that students that are coming on board to be herbalists get trained in some of these things we're going to talk about today, and also that the CPD for practitioners as this world develops. And so it's really about engaging, and how can we engage with our suppliers as well. And I think there's a lot that professional associations can do in this area, because, professional associations set the standards for what it means to join the club, join that membership. And I think as we've grown, up in abilities to deliver really good quality in lots of places for practitioners, there's a need to obviously enhance that further, but to take the sustainability issues ahead. So I'll finish there, and thank you very much indeed. Look forward to the rest of the day and engaging in the conversation.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. And we fixed the Zoom thing so people more can come in. And I haven't had a chance to look to see if there are questions. And I'm going to introduce Anastasia Timoshima from Traffic, who is going to speak now about herbal sustainability, wild harvesting, and climate change.
Thanks for introduction. And hi, everyone. Nice to see you. More and more of you. Let me just share my screen. Right. I hope you're able to see it, but please give me a shout, someone, if you can't. But hopefully that works. Good. Well, it's always a hard act to follow after Sebastian, and I did once see Sebastian follow David Attenborough, so that's pretty hard lineup. So as Anne said, I work in Traffic, and I think there is a little bio in the chat. And my my take on this topic comes kind of a lot from a conservation sector. So trying to take a big step back and think about some of the things we know about the issue of herbal sustainability, wild harvesting, and climate change, and also what is it that we can do collectively and individually in this space. So for those of you who don't know Traffic, we work on the issues of trade in wild species, of fauna and flora and fungi, and looking at the issues of sustainability and legality. So what do we know about this whole issue around kind of conservation and concerns or threats around the species, and how the issues of sourcing overlap with issues of climate change? So it's sort of interesting, because we do on one hand know quite a lot, and then we know quite little about some other aspects of it. And I think maybe part of the solutions that we all need is in part in that conflict between what we know and what we don't know, and how to bridge the gap. So first, the space we're in, of course, we talk about what is often referred to as the hidden ingredients, a hidden harvest. So ingredients in the products, in multiple products that are in multiple consumer goods, food, medicine, cosmetics, homewares, and so on. And it makes it very difficult, of course. It makes it difficult to communicate from the perspective of sustainability sector and conservation sector. It makes it really difficult to get the traction with change, because they're not necessarily this exciting species that everybody sees in front of them. And so, but I know that I'm here talking to the right audience who understands very deeply the importance of those ingredients in the products. Now, in terms of the threats to biodiversity, we are living in kind of unprecedented time of massive declines in biodiversity, and the records of it being available. So this picture is from the Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services in 2019, which looked at, it was the first consolidated resource that looked at both the drivers of biodiversity loss, as well as the direct and indirect drivers of that. And so what we want to kind of consider and keep maybe on the back of our minds, and I know it's very big picture, but it is all connected, of course. So in terms of what we're interested here is this blue and orange lines on this graph. So if you think about the terrestrial biodiversity, so that may include plants, animals living on land, the direct exploitation and the change of land, so habitat change, are two of the biggest drivers of biodiversity loss. In the marine environment, direct exploitation, so the use of resources, is actually the biggest driver of biodiversity loss. So there is an established understanding that over decades, over the centuries, the reliance of humans on the species has led to massive biodiversity declines. So not really great news. And of course, it is exacerbated by the climate change. So the diagram that Sebastian showed is true, and we see this confounding issues and multiplied effects because they're coming jointly at it. Now, end of last year, another IPBES report has been published, and it's really interesting. If you haven't taken a look at it, but it's 1,000 pages, so which is great because it makes it the most authoritative resource on what do we know about the sustainable use of wild species. So one of the threads of what is covered in this report is what they call gathering, so a focus on wild harvesting of plants, fungi, and algae, and it gives us this glimpse into, I think, what a lot of us understand as a really big issue and a big sector, but it provides the biggest to date scientific underpinning to how much we rely on these resources, how much is our industry relying on it. So what the report concludes is that billions of people in all regions of the world rely and benefit from the use of wild species. It estimates that 1 in 5 people around the world are using plants and fungi consistently. 1 in 5 people around the world is over 1 billion people around the world. It is a billion-dollar industry that relies on trade in plants, algae, and fungi, and the trade is increasing worldwide. The sustainability of use, which of course is what we're interested in, because we accept that, and I think we all come at this, that reliance and interaction of humans and species is an important part of our health, well-being. But the sustainability of use is extremely variable. So we see with some species quite high levels of threats, and it depends on a number of different issues, including land use changes and climate change. So it is not just about the use itself. And that there is a major, very large number of species, over 25,000, so 30,000, Sebastian, is probably a good number indication for what we know so far and what's documented. But it has the fewest number of indicators for sustainable use, especially related to governance. So what it tells us is we use quite a lot of these species, we rely on them for our health and well-being, but we don't regulate it very well. We don't know very well where they come from. Now, zooming into those, well, here, let's call them 26,000. We're going to just operate, but it was roughly the same figure. So this comes from the IUCN SSC Medicinal Plant Species Group, latest evaluation from looking into the IUCN Red List, which is an authoritative list on understanding the threats to species survival. Okay, so the biggest issue actually we have with that is that we know very little. Only about 10% of those species are assessed against the IUCN Red List. So the answer to the question how threatened these species are is we don't really know. And what we know, our confidence about how generalized it could be is very low. Because of course, if you can't assess a lot of species and understand their science and how their population size, you probably go for species that are more threatened than others because there is bigger, body of knowledge around it. So for a lot of species, we don't know. Those that we know about, 10% are threatened with extinction in the wild, which is a very, very large number. And of course, the reason it's a concern and the reason we're talking about it here is that trade in them is one of the driving factors of this loss. So we know that over the past 2 decades, there has been a really big increase in both volume of use of trade. This is focusing on international trade. And of course, the international trade is just one small factor of the use of species. So domestic use, local use, national use is also very, very large. We also know, and this is part anecdotal information and part documented, there has been an increase in the use of herbal ingredients with COVID. So that's just one example of something we see in front of us. You know, these trends are not set in stone in 2000 and 2020. Things are changing. It's a very rapidly changing field. We also know that even though it's maybe not a very common topic to discuss, maybe in this forum, very interestingly, in the past decade, you know, biggest percentage of seizures of wildlife in the European Union, as well as in the UK, are, you know, the biggest percentage is in plant-derived medicinal products. So you know, we hear a lot about illegal wildlife trade, what it means. Well, in fact, the biggest illegal wildlife trade entering the EU by the percentage of seizures is actually in plant-derived medicinals. So again, you may not think about it as something that concerns you, but it's always worth thinking about those regulations and whether species are CITES listed, for instance. I know somebody on the call here is actually a specialist in this, so I'm sure if there are some questions around this, Sonia could help answer them. Now, what else that report is telling us is, and this is quite interesting diagram. I'm not going to go through each and every bit here, and of course you can have access to the slides, but it's interesting because it tries to set out and tease out from all the knowledge we have, what does make sustainable use work? What are the conditions when it works well? And I think, of course, it's, you know, this report is probably more created for decision makers and policymakers, but I think it's as applicable to the industry and to practitioners as it is to policymakers, because there are, you know, if you think about the orange bit where it says, well, some of the policy conditions that make it less sustainable is where we ignore history, we ignore the rights, we overlook social context, mismatching the scales of production and demand and supply, criminalizing the marginalized people, creating power imbalances, and also over-relies on laws and rules. And this is an interesting space because on one hand, we know that appropriate regulations, appropriate policies, standards, tools could actually create a really good systems. But of course, operating in a space where a lot of trade is informal and a lot of people rely on it with no access to the resources or no rights and tenure, over-regulating is probably have more damaging effect than under-regulating. And then on the other hand, what is it that's enabling sustainable use? And maybe some of those words are really helpful to consider as this meeting, you know, as this conference is going ahead. You know, it's the systems that are adaptive and democratic. They ensure robust institutions. It's use that is tailored to the context. It's inclusive and participatory, recognizing plural knowledge systems and values, and share benefits equitably. I think these last 3 points are really, really interesting. And again, and I know just from seeing the agenda and the different topics of conversation, I know this will be touched on a lot. So really, really important elements. I'm going to skip over this actually. Another thing that, of course, is of what we know, of what we know and don't know, is the supply chain complexity. So all this is meant to illustrate is that there are multiple complex trade chains that are in which plant ingredients are often involved, and the same ingredient could, of course, be used locally, nationally, and internationally, going through a number of different intermediaries and processes. And that's the reality of life. You know, achieving high quality in production could mean certain level of processing. Also, you know, changing hands. It also, of course, the more complex supply chain is, the more difficult it is to think about the traceability, the control of quality, and kind of tracing back the situation. A lot of the trade is informal and underreported, and we do operate in a very complex regulatory environment. Again, I'm grateful Sebastian mentioned CITES in the beginning, so the convention that regulates international trade in endangered species of fauna and flora. But there are a lot of other regulations that would be applicable. And I think what we've been seeing, and I feel this belongs in this what we know part here, is that regulation become more smart. You know, we're seeing more regulation looking into the issues of due diligence. So something that I feel we maybe paid less attention. We in conservation sector paid less attention in past because we look more at the regulations on the level of offtake and sustainability from ecological perspective. We see more and more regulations and policies focusing on the social issues and labor conditions in the market. Again, something this conference is trying to tackle. And finally, obviously, it's all not all doom and gloom. So, you know, what we know is that the solution to these challenges is rarely about stopping harvesting altogether or producing or buying, because that can and does remove critical income from communities in need and can have an perverse effects. So if something doesn't have an economic value anymore, this can actually lead to, you know, trees being cut down rather than products from the trees being sustainably used. I think the really important focus is on seizing the opportunities and working towards responsible sourcing and sustainable supply chains. And again, I hope I'm trying to convince you there is so much we know about why and how it works. And it's really about taking those steps forward. And it's because non-timber forest products or wild plants and fungi are quite often focal points for landscape scale wildlife conservation. Through sustainably using species, we can actually preserve and conserve areas, they can be drivers for development and improve livelihoods and incomes, and also ways for businesses to develop environmental and social targets and commitments. So what can we do? Now we know all that, we've refreshed our knowledge. Well, let's have a think. So what I'm going to talk through is about some work that Traffic has been doing and sort of inviting you to partake in that and also share your thoughts about this. And obviously, if you have any comments, and I know Anne has said this already, if you have any comments, do drop them in the chat box as well. So in terms of facing the challenges, we're just wanting to draw attention to the two products that we've produced last year. One is the WildCheck report and another one is the WildCheck platform. And the idea was trying to deal with some of this uncertainty and unclarity in the sector, because I feel we know a lot of big things. We do understand a lot of big picture things, but once we start drilling down at the level of supply chains, the information is scarcely available. I mean, what are the risks and opportunities in the supply chains? What are particularly important issues that we should be thinking about when we think about licorice sourcing or other species? So this resource is available freely. It's available online for download. Go to this link, wildcheck.info. It has resources page with a lot of other links to this information. And we're really trying to bring together in the report some of the most up-to-date information on what we know about the wild plant sourcing, what we know about the risks of it, what we know about the threats of it, and what are some of the actions we can all take. The way we approach it is in part by saying that 30,000 is a scary number. Well, 25, 26, 30, it almost is. It almost doesn't matter. It's a big number of species and how do we start? You know, it's a scary perspective. So one of the things we try to do is really narrow down to some manageable number of species about which we can have a discussion and use them as a touch point. And if you want, flagships of trade. Now, it may not be the most intuitive selection of species for you, but what we've attempted to do is, and this is important, this is not a list of threatened species, okay? So this is not the approach we've taken. We didn't try to highlight species most at risk. For us, it's a combination of important species that are mostly wild harvested, and in totality, they represent maybe global trade in these very, very important resources. So some of them are more threatened than others. Some of them probably have a lot more conservation action attached to them. You can think about the African cherry, Prunus africana, and just how much investment and attention has been to it through CITES listing and the management of the bark harvests. But also it includes some species like baobab, where the likely offtake of sustainable product could be quite high if the appropriate social and environmental safeguards are in place. So it presents these opportunities also for different sectors to find their space. Some of the species are used in food sectors, other in cosmetics, other in medicine. And the approach we've taken is to think about it as a risk and opportunity kind of profile. And there was an important reason to it. So one is really to try and find the key a bit maybe to decision makers in the business and industry, because the risk-based approach is something that industry uses a lot. But also we wanted to have those two pictures of environmental and social risk, because we're finding increasingly that talking about social risk finds kind of finds a faster pathway to for industry, and also having done the exercise of social and environmental risk assessment, our finding was that so many more of those wild dozens have extremely high social risk, which actually was a surprise for me. And I've been working in this space for a while as well, trying to think about the risks and opportunities. And this is what I'm talking about. So I'll just show you, just flash this. This is all again available online. So you'll see social risk is high for most of this species. Remember what this isn't. This isn't talking about your specific business. This isn't your supply chain. This is a more generalized picture of the supply chain of these products, focusing on some of the key countries it's exported from. So do go in and dig in. I mean, our idea here is to bring in this information together so that it becomes the first point of conversation and something that to take home with you. And then just to say, just to give maybe.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a couple of minutes, please.
But that's good. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. So just to give an example of the type of kind of work we do, or where some of this work is landing as well. I'll talk very quickly about a project in Nepal and this species that Traffic has been engaging with partners on for a while. The species called Jatamansi, or Nardostachys grandiflora, Nardostachys jatamansi, is fairly well known in particular users, and generally one of these flagships of trade in medicinal species. Jatamansi is wild harvested only in high altitude alpine Himalayan regions, and Nepal is its main exporting country. There is about 15,000 people that are involved in harvesting of Jatamansi in Nepal, and in the project sites where we operated initially, where we've engaged 2,000 of the households, it was found that 75% of the households generated cash income from this species. Now, the starting point for our project was a change in regulations in Nepal, so where there was an unintended ban in trade of all CITES Appendix 2 listed species in 2017. And the project had this very ambitious aim to try and bring in some of the market-based approaches into a trade that's been regulated already by CITES, but also try and forge some new partnerships around with very different skill sets. So we've been doing this work for about 6 years now, 5-6 years now, and there are some really interesting lessons learned, which again, I hope could help with and inform some of the thinking around it. So Nepal is one of the fairly unique countries in the world with a very well developed community forestry system, and this is very, very unusual. So the decentralized management of resources, of natural resources, is an unusual situation around the world. We found that devolving this authority to manage the harvest to communities through establishing community forest user groups did help a lot the economic and sustainability benefits at local level. And so this takes me back again to that picture I flashed in the beginning of what makes sustainable use work. It does work when people have the rights to own, to decide about the harvest and sustainability. But also we've been working with applying FAWA's standard principles here in a number of different ways, in a fairly creative ways as well, including to update the management plans for community areas. And for us, the big learning is that when it's set right, when these conditions are set right, these tools work. They do create a much better, much traceable systems for supply that could really be benefiting the system you operate in. And I'm going to skip all the way over here and finish on this. So what can you do? What can we all do? So some ideas, please do make informed decisions and keep up to date with trends on what's happening. We're trying to use this platform to populate it with resources, and has been running incredible work. I feel we're moving in 2023, we're moving in this space where not knowing is not a good answer anymore. There is a lot of resources out there. If you don't know, ask. You know, we're here to help. We've said something we call We Use Wild Pledge, which is a commitment, a public commitment, but it's not scary, right? So do check in, check the platform, check what We Use Wild Pledge is. It's really about celebrating the fact that you are using wild plant ingredients and putting some commitments in place that suit you. You know, whatever your journey is it about next 5 years, next 3 years? You know, let's get you there. Do consider bio-certified ingredients whenever possible. And if they're not available, do engage with the suppliers. I think they're obvious, very obvious questions, but I think sometimes we skip over them. We in the industry we operate and work in, some of these questions are very uncomfortable and you may be not getting the answers. Again, let's put pressure together on the companies who aren't able to give you answers. You know, we're here, so please get in touch. Thank you very much. Sorry, I think I ran over a bit. Thanks.
Well, Nastia, thank you so much. It was fantastic information on the, you know, the work you do and Traffic do for, you know, on all of our behalves. We really, applaud you. Thank you. And that was fascinating information. There's a few questions in the chat, but we might move on and come back to those, as we've got the privilege of having Tony Booker with us. And he is a Chinese herbalist, but also a researcher at the University of Westminster and an expert on quality. So Tony, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for joining. Over to you. You've got 20 minutes, please.
Okay. Can you see in the screen?
Yeah, it's good. You could make it big if you want.
Let's go for slideshow. How's that?
Great, thanks.
Okay, great. So, welcome everybody. I'll move swiftly on. Are all herbs equal? The answer to that is no, they're not. We can establish that right at the start, and we're going to.
You mean what's down?
Sorry. Some. Oh, okay. Research on the relationship of quality to sustainable value chains.
You guys want to go back?
Sorry, was someone asking a question?
No, keep going. It's just someone who is not needed.
Right. Okay. So what we're going to look at is some of the quality problems found during the analysis of, I've used the term plant-based products because that seems to encompass most things. We look at some different ways of sourcing herbs and how that might affect quality in the different value chains, and then just finish by looking at some future initiatives of how we might control the supply of herbal products in a better way. So we're going to look at some of the not so good cases, if you like, or some of the cases where quality is a problem, where some adulteration has taken place. With all these slides, you'll be able to see there's lots of examples of good quality at the same time. I'm not going to focus in on the good quality ones in this presentation until we get to the end, and we can kind of compare, you know, how we can achieve better quality. So one of the first products we looked at was rhodiola. Rhodiola rosacea, as it was marketed for, and what we found is that a lot of the products on the market weren't actually rhodiola rosea. They were actually rhodiola, probably rhodiola crenulata, but they could have been other species as well. And just in this chromatographic analysis, a TLC analysis, sample 11 was a legitimate rhodiola rosea sample, which should contain rosavins, which is in the track just labelled R, and you can see it's only 11 that contained the rosavins, and the others didn't, which indicated that it was likely to be crenulata. Track 8 was very interesting because it didn't seem to contain anything at all, but with some future or later analysis using mass spec, we determined it was 5-hydroxytryptophan, so a mild antidepressant type compound. Get rid of this screen. So then next we looked at ginkgo biloba compounds. Our products. We bought lots of products, mainly off of Amazon. That's quite a good source to find the products. The ginkgo was particularly interesting. Let's see if I can get rid of that top screen. No, I can't at the moment. Yeah, with the ginkgo, we found, again, you can see there's quite a few products that look quite reasonable, but then there's lots of products that don't look as good, and certainly lots of products that seem to have very high levels of rutin, which if you look at 0.3 on the left hand side and look along from there, you can see these big bright yellow bands, which is rutin. Track 1 is the actual standard, and you can see that the rutin concentration in there isn't particularly high. So we started to wonder why is it so high in some of these other products. And then there's products such as number 30 down the bottom that just seems to be rutin by itself. Number 7, well, that happened to be 5-hydroxytryptophan once again. But on closer analysis, so 454 was a very well-known German extract that looked quite similar to the reference product. But out of the 35 samples, there was only actually 2 that complied with the European Pharmacopoeia. Not that they needed to as food supplements, but we just used the European Pharmacopoeia as a standard. But what we found that they either contained high levels of rutin or low ginkgo metabolite content was one of the major problems. In fact, that we concluded at the end over 50% of the samples were either adulterated with high levels of rutin. They had incorrect species. Sephora species has a very similar profile to ginkgo for some reason, but it can be used as an adulterant, or have low ginkgo metabolite content. The only way that they could really have had these high rutin levels as it is if it had been added as a excipient. Why would you do that? Because then you can claim 24% flavonoids, because rutin is a flavonoid glycoside. So you can add some of that to your product, and then you can make the label claim 24% flavonoid glycosides without actually having that in there from the rutin. Next, we looked at milk thistle products, silimarin, and all the different compounds that make that up. Once again, the ones on the left here is what it should look like, and then you can see in the 5th track seem to contain nothing at all. And then there were some low quality products, and the last product didn't look like milk thistle very much. We also looked at this one using NMR spectroscopy, and you can see in the top scans there's hardly any of the active ingredient there either, and that's probably main reason for that is that it was probably incorrect extraction techniques used. You need at least 60% alcohol in order to attract silimarins. If they didn't use that, they're not going to extract it, and they'd end up with something that looks like this. Then we looked at St. John's Wort products. Again, finding lots of marketed products off of the internet. this time again, there's lots of products there that look pretty much as they should look compared with the standards. But then if you look on the bottom row, especially in the second half of that, we can see there's lots of products that didn't contain the kind of secondary metabolites we'd expect to see in St. John's wort. One of the particularly interesting things about the St. John's wort is we found they contain dyes. And this was a bit puzzling to start with, why you should find dyes, food colorings in a medicinal product, not even a food supplement, because it's not allowed as a food supplement in the UK. It might be different in the US, but St. John's wort has to be sold as a medicinal product in the UK. But it was only the samples from the USA, which was, it kind of made the puzzle even worse. One, why did they contain food dyes? And two, why were they only from the USA? Which kind of provided a bit of a clue as well. So we thought, oh, we go and look in the United States pharmacopoeia and see if that gives us any clues. And it did. What we found, that the dyes were elevated because hypericin absorbs at the same wavelength as some of these dyes, and so by adding the dyes you can actually fool whoever is doing the analysis to think that there's some hypericin or elevated levels of hypericin in there, when in fact they've got some tartrazine or sunset yellow or something like that that just absorbs in the same place. So it's a way of companies to add adulterants to their product to make the product look better than it actually is. So why does this happen, and how can we, what measures can we take to help prevent this happening? So we can start to move on to that. This is one of the first projects that I did on turmeric, and this we sourced samples from health food shops and the internet, and also from traveling around India. We took samples and we looked at them with HPTLC, and we can see, and these were all marketed as curcuma longa. The ones on the left, you can see there's a zone missing at the bottom, and that's one of the curcuminoids. And that indicates that this is not curcuma longa, it's curcuma aromatica, also known as jungle turmeric, and that's used as a common adulterant. So that explained that one. And then further onto the right hand side, we see some with some very high levels of curcumin, the very dark red zones. These are extracts, so you could say some are very high quality extracts. One seems to be just curcumin, which probably isn't such a good profile, and may explain why sometimes people have toxic reactions, hepatitis, causing hepatitis by taking turmeric extracts, or perhaps the amount, just taking pure curcumin isn't such a good idea. Perhaps it should be taken as more of a balanced herbal plant. And then we can see some to the right hand side that are not so good quality. The final three are Chinese extracts used in the TCM tradition. There's no curcumin, and that's not surprising because they're aqueous extracts. I'm not sure why the products are produced. There's probably some polysaccharides in there as well. But in Chinese medicine, Jiang Huang or Yujin, the turmeric herbs should regulate blood, and they should help with pain, which is what you think the curcumin would be doing. If they've just got polysaccharides, then they should probably move their category from regulate blood herbs to being some kind of spleen tonic, some kind of digestive tonic. So I think this is something that the TCM industry needs to address, because I'm sure lots of practitioners don't realise that their turmeric products do not contain curcuminoids, and some of the other products that should contain active compounds, such as in Dunglai angelica. Again, you need to extract some of these plants in alcohol in order to get the active ingredient. So I think some more work needs to go on there. But with the what I wanted to get around to in the project in India, I was actually following comparing two different value chains. One happened to be an integrated value chain. This was a Pucker Herbs product, and I was comparing that against other products on the market. We can see, if I get, just get my little pointer up, spotlight, yeah, should work. Yeah, you can see no, I didn't want that. Yeah, I'll do these three products there. That's actually just fresh turmeric. And you can see they contain some nice a nice selection of different compounds, and particularly we've got ones here. I hope you can see that. And it was only the products in the integrated chain that had these compounds. And this was one of the things that I wanted to show in my PhD. By having a shorter value chain, you actually preserve some of the important secondary metabolites. I'll move on. Don't seem to be moving on. We'll be stuck. There we go. Yeah. So the secondary metabolites. So 47 was the Pucker product from the integrated chain. 32 was from the typical value chain where the herbs are just bought at auction, and 40 was one of the fresh turmeric rhizomes. And so at the time I was thinking one of the good ways of seeing how good quality of something is, really is to compare it to the fresh plant, because that gives us a good idea of all the metabolites that should be in there. I didn't know exactly what the compound was. We did some at the start, but we assumed it was one of the volatiles, and turmerone is one of the main compounds. And so we did some NMR. That showed made it conclusive that the compound in the integrated chain contains some turmerone, where you can see in the other samples it was a lot less. So that kind of proved the concept that keeping the value chain short is better for keeping for resulting in a better quality product. So just to conclude, we can say in the last 12 years we've repeatedly showed instances of poor quality and adulteration in plant-based products. The reasons that underlie this is often that people want to use cheaper ingredients, cheaper in starting materials, or they're just unaware of good practices along the value chain. In order to improve this, we need better regulation. Can be voluntary regulation, doesn't have to be statutory regulation, in order to ensure that safe and acceptable quality products are available for the consumer. And this includes better control of the value chain, and I've like these little ditties, and we can say from seed to supplement, but also the regular testing of these products to help ensure compliance. And I think testing is something that we're quite lacking at the moment. I know the American Botanical Council has started doing a lot of this. That's something that we'd like to start doing a lot more as well. And we've had a lot of support from people like the British Herbal Medicine Association, the EHTPA, the Registered Chinese Herbal Medicine, and the UK industry that support ongoing projects, both at UCL and the University of Westminster, where we want to look at the quality of targeted herbal medicine. And we can use our BSc, MSc, PhD students and postdoctoral researchers to be involved with these projects in order to find out where the poor practices are, and this will help improve the reputation of the herbal industry in general. So thanks for your attention. I'd like to acknowledge Pucker Herbs, Sunten Pharmaceutical Company, Schwabe Pharmaceutical Company, the BBC and the Leverhulme Trust for all their help and support for these projects. And I'd be happy to have any questions if there's any time.
Thank you so much, Tony. There is one quick question in the chat. People wondered if there were any brands in particular. I don't know if you go that far and recommend brands. I will say that in the longer webinar, I included a link. Tony and Michael Heinrich go into more detail about the kinds of value chains that lead to higher quality, and they go into more detail about the research. So you can find that here. But if you have a 30-second answer to the brand question.
It's difficult for a consumer to decide what's good quality and what's not without being able to test things themselves. But one thing that I say is ask questions to the supplier. Very often, if you ask questions to the supplier, they'll be able to tell you about the indications and what things are good for, but they won't be able to tell you where their herbs come from. Sometimes they won't even be able to tell you which country they come from. So if you can find out, do they know where they're sourcing their herbs from, and it's not just a market somewhere in China or somewhere in India or an auction in India, they actually know the farmers. So anytime it's any kind of integrated chain, that's very important. And I think if it's an organic is important as well, because at least you know they've gone to the trouble of all the trouble of getting soil association certification. So it's unlikely that they're, you know, if they've gone to that trouble, they're not so likely to be adding adulterants to their products. So integrated chains and organic products, I think, are two key areas to look for.
Great, thank you so much. I now want to turn to the next speaker. And Tony, I think there's some other questions in the chat if you wanted to look and respond there,
Okay.
that'd be great. I wanted to introduce Alison Sojuga, I never pronounce your name right, from Gaia Herbs. She works social sustainability and social impact. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm unmuted. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Anne. I don't think my own father can pronounce my last name, so it's okay. But I'm Alison Sojuga. I'm representing Gaia Herbs as well as our practitioner line, Gaia Herbs Pro. And I will be talking also about are all herbs equal? And as Tony said, no, they are not. And I appreciate that, frank answer, because it's very clear based on, what we've seen just from Tony's presentation and also from what we've seen over the years at Gaia and being in the industry, that there's a lot of factors that go in here. I have this slide later in the deck, but I did want to just pull up, since we were just talking about this, is questions to always ask herbal supplement manufacturers. And Tony mentioned a lot of these, but where did the herbs come from? Did they come from somewhere verified, a trusted farm? What were the relationships like with the manufacturers? As Tony mentioned, what agricultural practices were used? Did an expert formulate the herbal supplement? How was the herbal supplement made? And was the herbal supplement tested for quality? So these are just some really high level questions that you can start asking supplement manufacturers, and many of them will want to share with you all of the information that they have. So be wary of those who don't, like has been mentioned.
Alison,
in our
one quick thing, Alison, I think it's your presenter view, not the slide.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, let me change that real quick. Hold on 1 minute. Thank you, Anne. It wouldn't be a virtual conference without some kind of technical difficulties. Is this better?
Yes.
Great. So in this 20 minutes, we are going to really talk about why fairness matters to Gaia and what we're doing at Gaia to really realize our mission of connecting people, plants, and planet to create healing. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into a couple initiatives that we have both on the Gaia farm, but also in our global sourcing network. If you're not familiar with Gaia Herbs, we're an herbal supplement company. I put in some pictures of our Gaia Herbs Pro line that we have, and I'm really happy to be here with a lot of practitioners. It's been a focus of Gaia Herbs since we were founded 35 years ago, putting education at the forefront. We're located in Western North Carolina in a small town called Brevard. This is a picture of our farm and our ginkgo trees there. And we've been farming there organically since 1995. And last year marked our 35th year in business as a company. So really since our founding, Gaia has been committed to ethical trade and organic practices and being stewards of the earth. Throughout 35 years, this has not changed. I'm going into my 9th year at Gaia, and it really has been inspiring seeing how this company really puts mission and values first. I mentioned our mission is to connect people, plants, and planet to create healing. We really do use this within our operations. I serve on the executive team at Gaia, as well as on the governance and nominating committee on the board. So I really see firsthand of how valuable this mission is to the company. And because of that, we became a B Corp in 2018. And so that is, B corporations are companies that are committed to stakeholder accountability. So it's not just about shareholder value. That is a factor, but other stakeholders are also considered in all of the decision-making, including the environment. And we took this a step further, our governance structure last year, by becoming a public benefit corporation. So now we are actually a legal entity that is required to report on our ethical trade initiatives, our really any initiatives related to human health, environmental and planetary health. And our official public benefit statement is improving human health and well-being through natural products produced using sustainable and ethical methods. And I will say that even with this change, even though we've always been committed to fairness and ethical treatment and environmental responsibility, with this change in incorporation, I really do feel more attention is given to this area of social and environmental sustainability. And lastly, we're pioneering legacy brands. We've been a leader in quality, transparency, and sustainability for 35 years. With our Meet Your Herbs platform is really where we showcase our transparency of, what tests went into our products, where were our products sourced from, how were they made, what harvesting methods were used. So this is an area that we're very passionate about, and these initiatives are really supporting all of these broader values. So this is Gaia's seed to shelf journey, and it really is soil to shelf, and I think soil is really around it all. But high quality products, they start with high quality raw materials, and that starts with organics or the seeds that are used. And then this shows our seed to shelf journey, where we really try to be involved in every step of the process. At our own farm, we cultivate 250 acres of medicinal herbs, but also in our global sourcing network. We like to think that we are cultivating with a conscience by looking at every input, by looking at the ecological activity around us, by looking at how people are treated who are cultivating these plants. And that is the area that we're going to go into a little bit more here in a moment. We harvest plants at their healthiest, where their chemical constituents are the highest. Throughout all of these processes, we're doing quality checks. We're testing the raw material, we're testing the samples, we're testing the finished goods, all while being expert formulated. we have been very fortunate to always have herbal experts and practitioners at the forefront of creating our herbal products, because we're creating these products for human health, and we want people to feel better after they take these products. And, you know, herbalists and PhD student or PhDs, they really have dedicated their life to this kind of work. And it's not something that a marketing team can just say, oh, these are trendy herbs, let's go source them from anywhere and put them on the market. It's a really important aspect of herbal formulation. We don't use harsh solvents, only water, CO2, and food grade alcohol. Again, we're doing multiple testing, and then we bottle the majority of our products at our own facility, as well as ship them out to stores and to practitioners. So
Allison,
honing in,
no, there's
yeah.
3 more minutes.
Oh gosh, okay. All right, I'm gonna speed through this. So one of the initiatives that we're working on is on the Gaia farm, where we just became regenerative organic certified. And with this, last year we became silver certified, and we really wanted to look at regenerative agriculture, both as helping the environment, but also helping the farm workers who work on our farm. So these slides really are just showing why this is important to Gaia, and also just from the operations side, how we're really making sure that we're hitting these goals by being in our annual operating plan and also in our public benefit corporation. Specifically, we're looking at our farm worker program. We have 30 farm workers who are on H-2A worker visas, and we know this program is not designed for well-being in mind. So we have partnered with the Student Actions for Farm Workers out of Duke's Human Rights program, and we set out to design a whole farm worker housing system that really took a participatory approach to see, you know, what our farm workers needed. And then we also have 3 other goals related to farm worker advocacy. And then within our global sourcing network, our main initiative is converting over to an ethically certified ingredient supply chain. So again, we have corporate goals and are required now by law, which is great to say, to move our supply network into certified ethical ingredients. So this could be Fair Wild, and we had our first Fair Wild ingredient last year. Fair for Life, regenerative organic certified, really any certification that's third party that has a social component, because yes, organic is super important, but for far too long, we've really left the people part out. So we're really excited to grow these initiatives. And I'm very happy to say that we will be announcing our Fair for Life certification as a company very soon. We just have a couple last nonconformity things to address that were minor, but that's been a huge effort for us over the last couple of years. Another really exciting thing to see at Gaia is once we really created this goal of moving our supply chain to ethically traded ingredients, we went from 0 prior to 2019 to over 40, or to almost 40 this past year. So we're going to keep moving that forward. We do have 250 or so ingredients that we use, so it's no small feat. We often joke we love working at Gaia, but we do have a very complex product line and supply chain. And then I just wanted to end on, again, 5 questions to ask herbal supplement manufacturers of how consumers can consume with consciousness, but also how practitioners will be able to also have that consciousness into your practice. So
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And it's great to learn of those initiatives. And I'm going to keep us moving along and introduce Erin Smith, who's coming from Banyan Botanicals. Thanks so much, Erin.
Hello, everybody. Okay, fingers crossed that technology works here. Uh-oh. Actually, sorry, just a moment. Let me get in my presenter mode here so I can do this. All right. Hang in there. I'm almost there. Okay, let's see if I can get rid of this. All right, are you guys seeing just my slide? Woohoo! Yay. I'm just going to dive in because, as you can tell, it goes by really fast for us. There's so much to talk about. Let's see here. So as Anne said, I am with Banyan Botanicals. And for those that don't know, Banyan Botanicals is an Ayurvedic lifestyle company that was founded in 1996. And our mission from the beginning has been to help people achieve optimal health and well-being. And we also believe that our health is intimately connected with the health of the planet. So you can kind of say that since the beginning, you know, it's really social and environmental responsibility has really been in our DNA as a company. And we're really proud that we are also a certified B Corp, we use Fair Wild, certified organic, and we are certified Fair for Life. And congrats, Allison, I'm so excited for Gaia. Today, that's what I wanted to dig into. It's that fair piece of it, and really our journey with fair trade, as well as kind of why we feel this is important. Let's see. So fair trade principles have really been a part of Banyan since its early days. Our founders, Scott, Cody, and Kevin Casey, have always really felt that these principles are in alignment with kind of our desire to operate with a spirit of intention and reciprocity and care for earth and people. And, you know, it's also in alignment with Ayurvedic principles and values as well. But in the beginning, of course, we were a really small company, so we didn't have a lot of purchasing power. Also, doing Ayurvedic herbs, you're even more of a niche market than some of these herbs that have a much broader global scale. And so we were really lucky to be able to find partners that were aligned with our values so that we could really source herbs in the way that we felt were in alignment with our values as well. And so while these principles have really been part of how we work with herbs for a really long time, it's really relatively recent in our history that we've become certified. We were certified Fair for Life in 2020, and we'll kind of dive into what that is and why I just want to cheer on Allison, because it is a really big deal to get that certification and Gaia. And so we currently have 25 of our herbs that we use in our product are certified Fair for Life, and 42 of our finished products are certified, and we'll be releasing 16 more of those in the next year or two. But we just, as Allison said, like we have a long way to go. We are so proud of having none certified, you know, a few years ago to having these many, but like Gaia, we also have a really broad pharmacopoeia. So we have, you know, almost 200 different herbs that we're working with. So there's a long way to go for us to be able to say that all of our products are certified. So even though, you know, it's relatively recent that we've had this certification, we've been operating for a really long time with fair trade principles. And I'm not going to spend too much time going into all of these. I just wanted to touch a bit on the first two and give a little color, because I think the others are a little more self-explanatory. But maintaining direct long-term relationships with producers. So the majority of the herbs that are out on the market are really bought for price. They're bought, you know, people are getting the cheapest that they can, often from distributors that are aggregating things from lots of different suppliers and farmers. And the companies themselves have really little direct relationship with the farmers and the harvesters themselves. But when you have direct long-term relationships, that really allows us to be able to have a consistent high quality herbs, but it also allows the producers to count on a steady, stable market for their product as well, instead of growing it and hoping that they're going to be able to sell all of it. The second one is paying promptly and fairly. And we do really believe that fair trade is a strategy for poverty alleviation. And part of that obviously is you need to pay promptly and you need to pay fairly. to help those producers to have a sustainable livelihood. And part of that is also pre-financing. So without that, farmers are basically taking on the greatest risk and financial burden of growing the herbs. But if we're able to pre-finance and pay portions of that earlier, we're able to share that risk with the farmers. We're also able to allow them to have an income more throughout the year rather than just getting all of their income in one short season. And again, because of time, I don't want us to go through the others, but you can see the others here, and I know we'll share the slides at the end as well. So our Fair for Life difference. So in 2018, we began the process of becoming Fair for Life certified. This process is really rigorous, and it takes many years to complete. And the difference is that it basically, does the entire supply chain. So we're under as much scrutiny as all of our partners in our supply chain. To get this certification. And we chose it because of how thorough it is and its focus on environmental and social well-being in the supply chain. We have to, at Banyan, have to operate with the same fair trade principles. That includes like worker well-being, paying living wages, all of that in our company as well, that we expect to exist throughout the supply chain. And again, it's a percentage of all the premium that we pay for Fair for Life certified herbs also goes directly into a community development fund that allows for local development. The certification covers human rights and working conditions. It ensures accountability and transparency, again, throughout the whole entire supply chain. So we have to meet these standards as well of transparency and accountability, as well as having that along our supply chain too. And so we really felt that this was the certification that would allow us to have a really positive impact on the ground, but also hold us accountable and making sure we're walking the talk and living, truly living our values as a company. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the positive impacts that we see from fair trade in general, but obviously our focus is on the Fair for Life certification. We really do see this as a strategy for poverty alleviation. It does this in many ways, but probably the most impactful and obvious one is that premium that we pay. So in general, organic herbs are probably about 20% more in cost, about 20% more than conventional herbs. And then Fair for Life certified herbs are an additional 15% more than organic herbs. And so of that 15% more, 10% of that is going directly to the producers and 5% is going into this development fund. So that can really make a difference for farmers, just like all of us. With the more money we have coming at us, it's the most immediate change. That's what we feel the most. And so again, that 5% goes into this development fund that is completely run by the community. So the community dictates how those funds are used. We don't have a say in that. And sometimes they'll use them in ways that are related to the herbs themselves, but sometimes they won't at all. They'll use it in ways that are more for the community as a whole and not in any way related to the herbs. Accountability is a big one. It really empowers us to be able to ask the hard questions and to really hold us as accountable as our producers, but it allows us the ability to ask those questions of our growers and to really know what's happening on the ground and to really makes us a better company because of it, because we are also accountable for that, as well as we feel really sure that what we think is happening on the ground is really happening. So we really like that part of it. We are audited as a Fair for Life certified company every year, and our producers are as well. And it's a rigorous audit. And every year, though, we leave that audit thinking like, wow, we are a much better company for doing this. So that is a really big part of it. Open communication, again, because of the accountability and the relationships that are built with this, it really allows there to be better open communication where we can discuss ideas with the producers in our supply chain. We might be able to influence a bit more areas that need improvement, would it be quality issues or environmental issues, like doing more regenerative agriculture, agroforestry, and things that can impact overall the climate footprint. You know, we really feel like without Fair for Life, it's a lot harder to do that. We can still do it, but we have a better, they're more likely to listen, and our relationships are deeper. So I just wanted to go in a little bit on a few examples. I'm watching my time here. I know Anne will let me know. One, I want to talk about harataki. So harataki is one of the 3 fruits that are used in the famous Ayurvedic formula Triphala. It's amalaki, harataki, and bibataki. And in India, a lot of these harataki trees are in old growth forests. And this would be something that were often being cut down just out of necessity for firewood or to create arable farmland so that communities could have a livelihood from farming. And then an NGO in India has been working, that we partner with there in the supply chain as well, has been working to basically, has worked to get these forests Fair for Life certified so that they could have a fair income from them, and also connected the indigenous and local communities to supply chains so they had a market for this, as well as helped provide education on how to harvest them and process them. And because of that, they're able to get a sustainable income from these trees, which means that they remain standing. There's no reason for them to have to cut them down. They're well taken care of, and by extension, it improves the biodiversity in that area. And they also are doing more local small-scale processing and de-seeding and drying of the fruits there, which also produces additional jobs and income, but it helps us in our carbon footprint too, because we're not paying to transport, you know, all that water weight basically, when what we're wanting is the dried fruits anyway, as well as helping with quality. You're not going to have as many issues with microbial issues and mold and things like that if you're able to dry them and process them pretty quickly after harvest. So we think projects like this are just an example of that really creates like a fair value chain where it's a win for people, it's a win for nature and for the industry as a whole, and top qualities herbs that we get. So another one is talking about that development fund. So as I said, I feel like this is one of the biggest impacts that the Fair for Life can have is the development fund, as well as that pre-financing piece of it. And that premium that they are receiving as well. We also have helped some of our producers to get Fair for Life certified, because just like organic, it costs to be certified. So there are costs involved to that. And this development fund, again, is completely community driven. And so sometimes they're going to use it for smaller items that support them, and not necessarily common development things that you would think of. Having worked in development work in my career previously, you often tend to go to the bigger things, but often the community can feel supported by smaller things, and they know what they need in the moment. And so these are just examples of some of the things that they've chosen to spend their community development fund on. And one was thermoses for the entire community so that they can have their warm drinks on the farm and at home. Another was drying rugs that they can use in the field so they can actually properly dry the herbs there, which benefits us because we get higher quality herbs, but it also benefits them because then they're not having to lose some of their harvest to contamination with foreign matter or higher microbial counts. They're better able to meet our industry standards. So it works for them as well. So that is something that they have chosen to use that fund for. But having said all of this, we have to talk about the challenges, because there are a lot of challenges when it comes to fair trade. And the first and foremost, which Allison, I think, will agree with, and anyone on this call, I know Seb too, and that has worked in this, is just the availability of fair trade certified herbs. You know, we are just 12% of our whole pharmacopoeia right now that we have that are certified, and we would love to be able to say it's 100%. But some of that is just that there aren't any certified herbs of that herb is just, there's no availability of fair trade certified out there. And then again, in Ayurvedic pharmacopoeia, some of it is a bit more niche, so you have an even harder time with that. And so that's a real challenge for us, is just the availability of what's out there. I would say also lack of consumer understanding. You know, being Fair for Life certified, this is a heavy lift for us as a company. Like we do it because we believe in it, and we believe that it's important for the people and the plants, but because there's a lack of consumer awareness and the difference that these certifications make, we're constantly, you know, debating, like, does this actually translate into stronger sales for us? Do people actually understand why the products might be a bit more expensive and where that money is going and what it's doing? And we continue to go down this path because, again, we believe this is the way to do business. This is really the way to be responsible. But we have to balance that with being a financially responsible business as well. So that's a constant challenge that we're always weighing. I think as well that even though in a way it helps with the seasonality issue, that can be a real issue. And one of the biggest criticisms of fair trade in general is that, especially with commodity crops like coffee and chocolate, is that the producers are getting a fair wage, but only in those 3 months of the year, or a shorter period where they're actually harvesting and selling that, and that the rest of the year they're still struggling. So how do we expand that so that this is actually something that is a year-round sustainable livelihood for communities? And agroforestry definitely helps. That provides a lot more variety of crops that they can sell, that extends that seasonality. You know, the pre-financing I talked about helps, but there's still room to grow and areas that we need to improve in that. And I think that directly influences the next point, which is the younger generation is leaving farming and wildcrafting because it's not an appealing, sustainable livelihood that they can get. So how do we make it one where it does appeal to them? Because if we lose the younger generation, we're going to lose all of our farmers and our wildcrafters, which is going to be really hard for all of us if we lose access to those herbs and high quality herbs. And then there's still issues where it doesn't necessarily cover all the scenarios. Like we have a partner in India that has this beautiful 1,000-acre wilderness that they harvest from. It's well taken care of, and they would love to have it Fair Wild certified or Fair for Life certified, but because it's privately owned land, it doesn't quite fit with all of the certifications and what's there. So I think we still need to find ways that it can help, that we can encompass all the scenarios that are out there of how these grow. I know I'm towards the end here, so I'm just going to end with what you can do. And basically, obviously, purchase fair trade herbs is going to be the number one thing on there. And it does really directly impact the availability. Like the more there's demand for it, the more there's going to be more fair trade herbs available. It's kind of, I see it almost like how organic used to be when it was first starting, and it was harder to find the organic certified herbs, and now it's become more mainstream. And I think our hope is that fair trade's going to be like that as well, and that this is just going to be the norm of how you do business. So that's our goal. And so definitely purchasing fair trade herbs, educate your clients. If you're practitioners, the more consumers understand where their herbs are coming from and the difference between this fair trade and sustainable herbs and other options, they're more willing to support companies and pay that bit of premium for that high quality product. And just like Tony and Allison said, and Anne's heard me say this many times before, just ask those questions. It is so powerful. If you ask the hard company, all the companies you get your herbs from, ask them the hard questions, and they should be able to answer them. And that's a really quick way to know the quality of the company you're working with. But also the more they're being asked those questions, the more they're going to want to be able to answer them, and the more they're going to want to do this work and know that it's important to their consumers. And then finally, I just say, expand your understanding like you're doing today. Just being here at this great conference with all this information, like the better you understand where your herbs come from and the issues that surround them, then you're just going to be more equipped to be a better steward of these plants, that all of us that work with them, basically that's our job, really. We do lots of other things, but we're all here to be good stewards of the earth and these plants. And I know we probably don't have time for questions, but you can put them in the chat or you can email me. I'm always happy to answer.
Thank you so much. We have time for a few general questions, and I had a question that for Allison. I wanted to ask, because I rushed you along a little too fast, if you could expand, say a little bit more about the farm worker program, because I think that's unique. People talk about the H2A as kind of being enough to address migrant farm workers, but your point about it not really addressing the well-being of the farmers.
Yeah, definitely. There was actually just a big report that came out that's, I think the title of the report was H2A program or human trafficking. So there's huge issues in the H2A program, and we've always complied beyond H2A regulations to really embrace our farm workers who have been coming from San Luis Potosi for the last 25 years. And when we were looking at our corporate goals of what we wanted to set, this was an area that we wanted to do better. They're the land stewards of our farm. Collectively, they have over 250 years of medicinal herb farming experience, a lot of that gained at the Gaia Herbs Farm, and they'll bring their family members over. So it's incredibly specialized knowledge that they have of not just growing, but of harvesting. And so what we really wanted to look at were 4 areas that we thought that as a company we want to do better in, and that was improve their wages and benefits, improve transportation to and from Mexico and North Carolina, because that can be not only just uncomfortable and sanitary, but actually dangerous. We wanted to design and construct proper farm worker housing. Right now, they're located about 20 minutes outside off of the Gaia farm in an area that they've had safety issues and there's some health concerns. So that was a big one that we wanted to put together and get. We set a budget of over $1 million to invest in that program. And then lastly, we really wanted to focus on health and wellness advocacy. We've been working with a nonprofit in Western North Carolina called Vecinos, who focus on migrant farm worker health, both physical health and mental well-being. And just hearing some of their stories of growers being the farmers that employ H2A workers, they won't let Vecinos onto the property. They don't address health issues. They're living in kind of bunker style areas with just really undignified surroundings. When you're a grown person living in bunks with no mirrors and open bathrooms, it's not the most respectable experience. So that is some of the reasons why we wanted to do that. And this past year, we hit all of our goals of improving wages and benefits, improving transportation and the whole experience of them, and health and wellness advocacy. But the area that has taken us longer is the design and construction of the farm worker housing. But when we went through this participatory process for working in this project, we really wanted to make sure the farm workers were involved, because they're living here, they're leaving their families for months at a time. And that's why we brought in the Students Action for Farm Workers to design a process that included them. And so we're taking that feedback into, we have taken that feedback into the next stage. The design has been completed. The architect actually just won an award of that. And now we're seeing how we can effectively implement that onto the Gaia farms. So it's an area we're excited to continue to work on, and just to bring that dignity back to the people who are producing our medicinal herbs and who we rely on. They have the knowledge for us to be able to make our products.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.
We are now at the time for our break. So I think we'll take the break. There are more questions, some really good questions in the chat. Then Allison and Aaron, I hope you'll look at those, and really good questions about supply of fair herbs and the cost. I mean, you hear about all the work that these companies are doing. Clearly, it costs a lot more money. And so the idea of this conference is how we can build more momentum to support these kinds of initiatives. So unless Sebastian, you have something to say, we will take we have a 10-minute break to come back at the top of the hour for a 10-minute like metabolic break, which is a breathing exercise. And then the programming itself will start at 12:10 Eastern time. And I'll let you figure out your time zone. Thank you all so much.
Slightly daunting. It was a mixture of slightly daunting and inspiring, wasn't it? I mean, it was always quite intense, us pointing out the reality of the worlds we live in, but also some of the great practices and opportunities for solutions that we have. So after a quick break and having a cup of tea, we thought it would be good, having sat down for a couple of hours, to do a little bit of movement. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce you to Dr. Rob Verkerk. Rob is a champion of natural health, health freedom, and is a highly qualified scientist and natural health leader. And Rob, I know you're going to get us all going. Over to you for the next 10 minutes. There's a voluntary exercise, everyone, so take care. It's quite active.
So Serve knows what's in store, but fantastic to join you. What incredible work is happening here. I will suggest, to warm us up, if anyone has been sitting for the last couple of hours, how about moving to a standing position slowly as I just have a little chat to you, because we're going to get a bit active. So around, just find some space. Yes, I can see Gabriel, you're doing a fantastic job there. You have your space. Just very briefly, my background is as a sustainability scientist. I, as of about 3 weeks ago, have taken over from Gretchen Dubois as the executive director of the Alliance for Natural Health USA, but I'm the founder of ANH itself, and have been running for 20 years the international office based in the UK. So my passion, like many of yours, is sustainability. And of course, we tend to not necessarily, when we talk about sustainability, look at scale. You know, we can deal with the planetary scale, we can look at supply chains, we can look at communities. The bit that is often so missing is looking at sustainability in relation to the individual. And you know, even if you look at healthcare and healthcare systems, we don't often think of sustainability yet. As you'll read in newspapers, pretty much everywhere in the world, particularly in the industrial world, we will see that these systems are at risk of falling apart. And one of the solutions is actually contained in systems of bioethics that actually go back to the longest living texts in health, which of course go back particularly to the Vedic texts that are the basis of Ayurveda. And one of the central premises is actually autonomy. And so, you know, we're going to be doing a bit of autonomy today, and everything about herbal medicine. The real fixes are about sorting out an incredibly effective therapeutic relationship together with a degree of autonomy, two fundamental principles of bioethics that have to some degree been cast aside. So how many people have circulatory problems? Well, it's one of the biggest problems out there. Circulation issues, we see problems, increasing problems with heart disease, heart attack rates, stroke rates are up. One of the key factors underlying, again, another underappreciated factor, is endothelial function, which is what we're going to be working on in the next few minutes. And of course, we know that we can, what we don't want is arteries that are like copper pipes. We want nice flexible arteries, and as we age, endothelial function goes down. And of course, we can take, if we support autonomy, we can take certain foods and herbs like beetroot, like citrus peels that are rich in hesperidin, quercetin, and even isoquercetin. Isoquercetin can be more effective, it's more bioavailable. You get it in onions, you don't get it in quercetin-rich foods like apples. We need the precursor, which is an amino acid, L-arginine, and something again that a lot of people haven't realized, particularly if they are not in the natural health world, do not use mouthwashes, because when you use a mouthwash, yes, you can oil pull with your coconut oil, great, but antiseptic mouthwashes wipe out a bacteria that converts the nitrates in the vegetables that we're eating into nitric oxide, which we need in order to create the dilation. So, and of course, the other incredibly important ingredient is exercise. So we're seeing a lot of people who are trying to exercise, but actually don't have the resources within them to be able to actually dilate their endothelial, which this is the lining inside the arteries properly. So some of you may have heard of Dr. Zach Bush, who developed this nitric oxide dump. We have been using it in conferences and presentations around the world, which is why Sebastian knows all about it, because we've done it a number of times. But we use it in our office here, you know, on a daily basis, in order to, when people are sitting for long periods of time, just get up. It takes 3 minutes. You don't need to put gym clothes on. So I'm going to move straight into it. Find your space. Again, anyone who's has a heart condition, is not used to accelerating their heart rate, probably don't participate in this. It is, as Seb said, voluntary. I'm going to take you through 4 moves. We're going to do 10 reps of each 3 times. So that's a total of 120 moves. Those moves are going to activate around about 90% of the skeletal muscles in your body. So the 4 moves, I'm a bit tight here, but I think we're going to be doing squats, okay? So you're going to be going down, squatting, doing that 10 times. And we can actually increase the speed of that to really activate the muscles. And so that's the squat. We're then going to do arm raises. I think of them sometimes as military arms. I'm a pacifist, but these are military arms, okay? And we can do those quite quick. That's the second move. The third move is circular arms, okay? So you bring them right down to the bottom here. You can bring them together like this, and then make them collide at the top like this. So I think of them as angel arms. That's your third move. And then the fourth move are shoulder presses, okay? So those are the shoulder presses, and we're going to do them in quick succession. Effectively, you are doing a form of high intensity interval training. So it is also going to trigger mitochondrial biogenesis. So again, something that if we don't do that on a repeated basis, strange thing is many of us eat 3 times a day, but we don't trigger our mitochondria 3 times a day. We do very well to do it. So little exercises like this are one way of doing it. So are we ready? You found your space, and I will sort of talk our way through it as we do them. Okay, so 120 moves coming up, and on your marks, let's get going. Okay, squats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Military arms. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Angel wings. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Shoulder presses, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, all over again. Start with the squats again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Arm raises. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Feel your heart rate rise. Okay, angel wings. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Shoulder presses. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, the real work starts now for the heart and the mitochondria and the endothelium. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Military arms. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Feel that heart rate going up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And shoulder presses. Go for it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, give your body a little bit of a shake. Hope you can feel your heart rate has increased. Just a good one to get back to when you've been sitting for some time. So thank you very much, Seb. Back over to you.
Oh, Rob, thanks so much. That was absolutely classic. You did very well talking us through it as well and not being too out of breath. So great to activate our mitochondria. And thank you for placing it in the individual as well, so that we keep thinking about our own sustainability. So thanks so much for joining us, Rob. Do stay if you can, but I know you're normally back to back. So take care and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'd love to catch up very soon. We'll catch up next week, so take care. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, Rob. Okay. Well, now we can move on with the rest of the afternoon looking at sustainability. And I'm very glad to invite Joseph Brinkman is now speaking. Joseph, I think I saw you here earlier. You can.
I'm here, Sebastian.
Oh, great. If you're not too out of breath, you caught your breath back a little bit.
yeah, that was good. Thanks, Robert.
Well, it's a privilege to have you with us. Probably many of you know Joseph already. So I'll let you speak for yourself, Joseph, but I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, let me share screen. And let's see, PowerPoint. Okay, is my screen visible?
Yeah, that's come through. Maybe make it presenter mode so it goes full screen.
Full screen, okay.
Down the bottom, I think, of the PowerPoint.
Are you seeing it now?
Oh, that's great, Joseph. Okay.
Okay, good.
20 minutes or so. Let you go.
Okay, right. Well, thanks for inviting me today. I will be speaking from experience on this topic, and I'll be showing some photos from the field that represent the topic, and just summarizing some main points from some recent studies that I've been participating in that speak to the topic today. First, a disclosure statement. I'm an employee of a company, and I'm also involved with a number of nonprofit organizations, ABC, AHP, APA, USP, and IUCN. And next, so the main points that I will touch on today is traditional knowledge and biocultural diversity, sustainable production in the international trade context, one example of the scale from China, the supply chain risks, agroclimatic, anthropogenic, and geopolitical, a brief statement on the scientists' warning on climate change, and my most recent study, a new global estimation of medicinal aromatic plant species in commercial cultivation and their conservation status, which includes some information on from that study on the species that are cultivated where the wild populations are either red listed, national lists, or CITES listed. And then also a list of USP pharmacopoeial articles that are subject to appendices of CITES and voluntary standards. So first, a quote from a chapter that I contributed to a book on intellectual property in 2017. There's a growing body of literature suggesting that TK may be important in areas of climate change adaptation, preventing ecosystem collapse and loss of biodiversity, local food and health security, and new drug discovery to mitigate or treat diseases. Biocultural diversity, developed over many generations of experience of dealing with disturbance, can be viewed as an asset for climate change adaptation strategies. A study carried out by Ahmed et al. Showed that rapid urban development in India has been a leading cause of habitat destruction, change of land use for city development, deforestation, highway construction. It's relevant because it impacts the supply of particularly wild medicinal plants. The trade in the 21st century, even if you're in a country like the United States that hasn't ratified some of the international treaties, but trade is still happening in a context of international conventions, the CBD and Nagoya Protocol, and the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. And then there's conservation status assessments that can impact trade, especially if they're carried out by government agencies. So National Red List, it might have some control measures associated with them for access to raw materials. And there's just more and more directives and regulations in various countries concerning biodiversity conservation, fair labor practices, social responsibility, traceability, visibility. And one of the solutions to some of the problems is the emergence of voluntary sustainability standards for demonstrating economic, environmental, and social sustainability in the medicinal and aromatic plant supply chain. Throughout this presentation, which will be available, I do provide citations and links so people can get access to the cited studies. One study I carried out in 2015 for the International Trade Center, they wanted to get a handle on the scale of China's trade and how much of it could potentially be in the sustainability area, as evidenced by implementation of voluntary sustainability standards that are audited and certified. So in that study, we found that China's exports, annual exports, amounted to over 1.3 billion kilos, with a reported customs value of over 5 billion, which was about 15.6 of the total world medicinal and aromatic plant ingredient exports. At that time, estimated about 32.6 billion. Of course, more difficult to find out is how much is actually used inside China, never exported. My theory is that more than that is used in the national system of medicine and Chinese medicine, but it's easier to access data on the export trade data. In the study, based on information that we were able to get from inspection bodies, inspection and certification bodies for sustainability standards, it looked like it's somewhere between 5 to 15% is being produced under certification standards for the export market. Mainly organic, but also some, these days, some fair trade and fair wild and fair for life. I just absolutely love this picture. I took this picture in a meadow in southeastern Kazakhstan. The foothills in the back going up to the border of the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. But I put it in there because it's so beautiful. And one of the other risks that everyone's facing, not just companies who make products, but practitioners who dispense formulas, is that there's just more and more anthropogenic contamination of medicinal plant crops, from heavy metals to microplastics. They're ubiquitous throughout the world now. You can find them everywhere. Non-point source pesticide pollution, believe it or not, even in this location, some years later, got a sample that had some pesticide residues of unknown origin. There's no agriculture anywhere near this place, so it drifted pretty far. Pharmaceutical drug residues in irrigation water. One of the big ones for access to raw materials is the changing socioeconomic conditions. There are labor shortages throughout rural and remote areas where a lot of wild medicinal plants traditionally are harvested. They live where they live, but if there's no people there or people willing to carry on the tradition of managing the resources and harvesting them for household income, access becomes more and more difficult. So there's mass migration, particularly in large Asian countries. India became the most populous country in the world last week, surpassing China. But in both countries, there's been mass migration from rural to urban. This impacts labor. Same situation in Eastern Europe. It's getting harder and harder, for example, to find anyone willing to climb trees and harvest linden flowers during the two-week window that it happens in June each year. And these impact your access as practitioners to the correct material at the right times when you can get it. Climate change disruption, well, gosh, every year I'm hearing about it from everyone I see, whether it's a farm or a wild collection operation. Hotter and colder extremes, this affects the yields of plants, their stages of flowering, fruiting, and the quantities you can get, and decisions of when to harvest. And this also impacts the composition and content of the herbal drugs. Disappearance of pollinators, of course, if they go, we go. Geopolitical unrest. It's important to know where the herbs come from, because boy, there's a number of countries in the world that are just having one political crisis after the other. I think, I mean, some important herbs used in European medicine do come from Northern Africa, and Sudan's in a near civil war again, and that's a main source country for senna and hibiscus and other things. And Burkina Faso had 2 coups d'etats last year, and the current government's not in control of all of the border areas. So you can go down the list, and there's disruption, and then there's wars and rumors of wars, and people are rethinking their dependency or over-reliance on materials coming from China and or Taiwan, watching how that goes, and how the war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine goes, and who sides with who, and how will that disrupt access. And then loss of habitat due to development and urbanization, changes in land use causing rapid loss of biodiversity. In 1992, the first World Scientist Warning to Humanity highlighted the dangerously unsustainable rates of anthropogenic damage to the atmosphere, topsoil, forest, fresh water, ocean resources, and biodiversity overall. In 2020, Wendy Applequist invited me to participate in her study that was published in Plantamedica, the 2020 Scientist Warning on Climate Change and Medicinal Plants. Just to summarize, in that we recommended urgent actions, including conservation of wild populations and local cultivation of some medicinal plants, sustainable wild resource management, training for harvesters, sustainability certification of commercially traded medicinal plants, preservation of traditional ecological and medical knowledge, and of course, efforts to mitigate climate change impacts. That's an open access paper. So some numbers, frequently asked questions. Well, how many medicinal aromatic plants are used in trade? How many are farmed? How many wild? This is, Anne knows that she asks me these questions on occasion, and I say it's pretty difficult to answer, but it is something, different data sets can be looked at, and you can make some assumptions. In 2000, the American Herbal Products Association, in their Herbs of Commerce second edition, listed 2,048 species of herbs known to be in the US market. If something is in the import-export trade, it's likely to be in the United States market. So I think that the third edition is about to come out, and I'm certain the number will be higher. A few years later, in 2006, my friend Uwe Shipman et al. Estimated that as many 72,000 medicinal aromatic plant species may be in use, however, of which less than 1% or 720 were sourced from commercial cultivation. They estimated about 3,000 species could be in international import-export trade. For me, that correlates actually with the APA data, and it also speaks to the fact that most medicinal plants are not in import-export trade. They're used locally in regional medicine, and that's something we also found in our paper that I'll talk about, our recent paper I'll talk about later. Also in 2006, Mulliken and Inskip suggested that commercial cultivation may be taking place or occurring at some stage of development for about 900 medicinal aromatic plant species. And really to this day, that's the number that a lot of other researchers cite in their papers, that there's about 1/3 of the roughly 3,000 species believed to be in international trade are cultivated. The rest are still wild collected. I'll add to that recently I surveyed companies who are in pretty large scale trade of medicinal aromatic plants from Europe, and there's an interesting inverse relationship. Most to this day will still say that 60 to 70% of the species that they trade are wild, and meaning 30 to 40% are cultivated. But if you're talking in volume, then that's the reverse. 60 to 70% of the total volume of MAPs traded are cultivated, and 30 to 40% of the volume is wild, and that seems to be true. That's actually about the same at the company I'm affiliated with, the same ratio. In 2020, Royal Botanical Gardens Kew, State of the World's Plants and Fungi, they reported 25,791 species of plants documented to be of medicinal use. So one might imagine there's a big disparity between the 27,000 there and the number that Shipman et al. Came up with, 72,000. But then you have to look at your definitions. What are you calling a medicinal plant? Are you including medicinal, aromatic, and culinary plants? And where do you draw the line on your definition? Anyway, in our new study that I'll be talking about mostly, we found evidence of commercial cultivation of 3,227 MAP species at some stage of development belonging to 235 different plant families. And it's important to emphasize at some stage of development, because what we're not saying is that 3,227 MAP species are coming to trade and being used in products or in clinics and dispensaries entirely from cultivation. It just means we found evidence of commercial cultivation, and certainly in some cases, in many cases, most of the supply is still wild, but we found evidence of some farms growing it. So it's just an indicator, because one of the things that the funders of the study, and I should clarify, the study was a funded study that was commissioned by the German Federal Agency for Nature Conservation, and they wanted to find a few things out. They wanted to find out if there was a new number, if the 900 number was still correct that everyone cites, but if it's higher, is there a reason? Is there some correlation with the conservation status of the medicinal plants? What we can find out, and what are the methods of cultivation? Are they any indication of sustainable agricultural methods? And that was what we were asked to work on. So some of the results, we identified 13,371 distinct examples of commercial cultivation. And if the same item was grown even in the same country, but in a different way, the same species, it got two different line items. That's why there's distinct examples. So for example, if ginger or turmeric in one farm is being grown as an open field crop, but at another place is grown part of a multi-species intercropping agroforestry system, then it was a distinct example, because it would be coded differently as to the form of agriculture. After a taxonomic review and identification of unclear data sets, we had to exclude over 2,400 entries. For some reasons, the literature only provided, or the information source provided only genus level, or the species name was just not reconcilable. Couldn't make sense of it. And actually, but most of them were excluded because they did not provide a country. So some of our data sources were literature, and if the literature was not precise enough about the precise country or region or the form of cultivation, we excluded it from our data analysis. Of the remaining 10,943 entries, 7,271 provided the botanical name. That was a must. We had to have a Latin binomial, even if misspelled. We could solve that later. The country were grown, and some information about the type of cultivation. Of those, a little over 5,000 entries provided sufficient information on the form of cultivation, and of those, a little over 3,000 provided some information on additional attributes. For example, we wanted to know particularly if sustainable agricultural methods were being used, such as biodynamic or organic or regenerative, or or permaculture or others. So of these 10,943 entries that were included, we came up with 3,227 different accepted scientific names. So we looked at the we looked at the conservation status of the cultivated species for their wild relatives, for the wild populations. So using the IUCN Red List, 954 of our 3,227 did have IUCN Red List assessments. Most of them were classified as least concern or lower risk. Only 2.5% of our sample were in the threatened category, including critically endangered, endangered, or vulnerable. 24, less than 1% were near threatened. 5 species were extinct in the wild. So initially from the IUCN assessments, again, only 29.6% had IUCN Red List assessments, but of those, it didn't appear that threatened status was a driver for a reason to cultivate. However, when we look at National Red List, we had more data. 54% of our sample had National Red List assessments, but these National Red Lists many of them don't use the same IUCN criteria, so you have to build some bridges. Many of them, however, were safe, least concern, or unknown, but 21% of these were assessed nationally as threatened, at least in one country. And this would equate IUCN threat categories of critically endangered, endangered, or vulnerable. 1% in this sample were extinct at the national level. And then CITES, 109 of the species in our list are listed in the appendices. So 2 were included in Appendix 1, 1 in Appendix 3, and 106 were in Appendix 2. This has changed in the meantime because a couple more genera have been added. All rhodiola species are now in Appendix 2 in the meantime, and also the Tebabua from South America have been added. So looking at the United States Pharmacopoeia compendia, this is just the next 2 pages are tables of official articles that have pharmacopoeial monographs, either in the United States Pharmacopoeia, the National Formulary, or the Food Chemicals Codex, just showing that there are articles of botanical origin in the pharmacopoeias that are in the appendices. And to this, I did add the rhodiola species that are in the USP, Crenulata and Rosea. And Sebastian asked me to contribute to Herbal Reality in 2021, an article which you can find there, First Do No Harm. And in this, I'll just point out in that article, it is rather complicated for a practitioner to figure out or how to mandate, if you're not buying large quantities, how to get material with full visibility, traceability to origin, and some verifications or certifications of sustainable production, not just ecological, but making certain that there's no exploitive labor and that people are getting paid fairly for their work. So that article just provides some links. There are small to medium-sized distributors out there who service cottage industry and small companies and practitioners, where you can buy smaller quantities of things. And you can find some of these in the databases in the Fair Wild Trading System, the Union for Ethical Biotrade program, and the Fair for Life Social and Fair Trade Certification program. And my only advice is, it can be daunting if you're stocking 50 or 100 botanicals in your clinic or dispensary. Just start out with a couple of them and see if you can get to visibility with them, and just take one at a time. I would imagine and admit that it might be more difficult at the practitioner level in the clinic to do this than a larger company that has more leverage and more access to origins. And I hope I didn't go over time, but with that, I'd like to thank you and just end with some images of wild collectors who I've had the privilege to, whoops, I lost my slide. Anyway, well, thank you.
Joseph, thank you so much. It's great that you ended with the wild harvesters that, do so much to creating a sustainable future. And, you've done as much as anybody, more than most people, with regards to driving the botanical industry upwards. So thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And I know you're busy. You're at a conference, and you're also at a conference, I think, with Roy Upton, who is now going to
Yeah, we're both at a conference, right?
So thank you. And Roy, it's great to have you here. Roy is founder and president of the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia and is going to speak about the link between quality and sustainability. So Roy, great to have you here. It's only showing half your slide at the minute.
Yeah, let me see if I can. First off, you can hear me, correct?
Yeah, we can hear you. That's great. And maybe just
Now, do you see the slide? Okay.
Now, perfect. Okay.
So this is actually less about. What's that, Seb?
No, that's good. You go for it. Thank you.
We good? Okay.
Yeah. Also, the line's a
So
little bit
thanks for
delayed.
inviting me to present like that. Oh, okay. But so thank you for letting me participate or allowing me to. This will be less about sustainability, more about quality and efficacy and maybe different aspects that most people may or may not be aware of. But yeah, Joseph and I are at this international conference for the science of botanicals at the University of Mississippi. So now we're stuck in a hotel room, but it's a good conference that brings together medicinal plant researchers from all over the world, specifically addressing quality issues. But also, what's interesting about it, it brings together a lot of regulators, at least U.S. regulators. I actually regulate a few from New Zealand. So this is kind of the herbal. It's a potential with some of the regulators who think very differently than us, from the perspective of how you judge or how you ensure quality, efficacy, and safety. And actually, they don't even really care about efficacy. They don't believe this stuff works at all. Herbal medicine works at all. So they're focused really on quality and safety. Anyway, it's just a conference that happens every year. I want to give people a little bit of a reminder where we come from. And we all know that, traditional herbal medicine practices go back, whether, however way you want to date it, from the Shadakshamhita and Ayurveda, or the Rig Vedas even, to 5,000 or 1,200 years ago to Shenab Ben Sao in the 3rd century, or Dioscorides in the 1st century AD. Before that, or I should say up until those times and up until probably about the 17th, 18th century, the primary assessor of quality and therefore efficacy was the herbalist interface with the patient. It was a herbal practitioner either picking the herb, preparing their own medicines, and dispensing their own medicines. And if they were good at what they did, they survived as a herbal practitioner, and if they weren't good, they didn't. And inherent in that determination of whether they were good or not had to do with the quality of diagnosis as well as the quality of medicine that they were producing and dispensing. But there's something that happened in 1803. Isolated an active constituent from a plant. The active constituent was morphine derived from the opium poppy. And that was a major demarcation in the history of medicine that said we no longer have to use the whole plant. And thus the kind of search for active compounds was started. Before that, all medicines, at least botanically based medicines, were whole plant medicines. So this literally changed the way that quality was actually defined, because now they were looking at active constituents. After the isolation of compounds came the synthesization of other compounds like the digoxin glycosides or caffeine alkaloids, and then the subsequent development of antibiotics. And that was another demarcation in medical history, the evolution of medicine, that said, not only do we not have to use the whole plant, but we don't have to use the plant at all. We can synthesize this stuff in a lab. And the advent of antibiotics was kind of the icing on the cake that said we have to attack disease. There's these little bugs called germs and pathogens that we have to attack and kill. Antibiotics means against life. So we have to kill these things. And that's where Western medicine is. But with the chemical isolation and then the synthesization, the focus on how you judge quality of a botanical to be used as a medicine completely changed. And that's the medicine we have today. That led to the pharmaceutical discipline known as pharmacognosy, which was looking at the plant from all different aspects. Now, one of the key attributes of early pharmacognosy was they really focused on this commercial source of the plant. What was the ideal growing? Where did it ideally grow? When it should be picked? How should it be dried? What were the adulterants that might be found? What were the different quality and grades that existed in the world? And that created this discipline of pharmacognosy. Now, in our world as herbalists, we like to have that direct connection with the earth, with the people that are actually picking the plant. The photo on the left is a harvested bacopa, which came from Sebastian many years ago, shared this photo with me. And then I had the pleasure of visiting ashwagandha fields in February of this year, where ashwagandha is grown in Rajasthan. In Rajasthan is one of the primary optimal growing areas for ashwagandha. And in this particular area, most of the roots are picked by women. But they have, just at this particular farm, they had 1,600 acres, but the company that hosted me, they work with thousands of hectares all throughout India or throughout the area. Rajasthan. We just visited this one farm, but sustainability. Who's doing the work of actually doing it? Is it being done in a sustainable way? There's not enough wild ashwagandha to supply the world market. In some countries, ashwagandha is threatened, sensitive, or outright endangered. But interestingly, in the historical literature of ashwagandha, there's passages that talk about only using cultivated ashwagandha and not using wild ashwagandha. So again, that goes to a major sustainability issue. But the major message here is how do we find and maintain that direct connection with where the plants are coming from, who's growing them, who's harvesting them, and in fact, whether or not it's being done in a sustainable way. Now, on a practical side, herbal practitioners, especially in the world of modern regulatory pressures, how does an herbalist ensure quality? And the only way that that most of us have available to us are senses. Our eyes, which is called organoleptic analysis or sensory assessment of botanical ingredients. And where do we how do we ensure that we know the quality, identity, purity of the herbal ingredient? And that begins with the whole plant out of the ground. But what I'm trying to show with this slide is that as we chop or break down or powder the herb, our ability to identify that with a high level of assurity is gone. But when you look at the golden seal on the top, even the golden seal in the middle, in its whole and semi-whole form or chop form, it's very easy to identify this to genus and species, even though it's chopped up. Also, you can identify whether or not there's any foreign organic matter present. There's leaves or grass or rodent parts or things like that. When you get into the powder, all bets are off. Any yellow powder could look the same. Any dirt, any animal parts, any grass, blades of grass or golden seal leaf could be in that, and you won't you won't be able to identify it without microscopy or chemistry or some other modern testing methodology. So our ability to assess quality and purity goes down as we process the plant. And in China, it's a little bit different. I'm trying to get my slide to move. In China, it's a little bit different in that you walk into any Chinatown pharmacy and this is what you see. And you see the herb in its whole or semi-whole form. And you also have many different grades sold at many different prices. And the picture on the right are the different grades of Dangui, Angelica sinensis, that are traded internationally, ranging from the picture up on the left, which is the whole root out of the ground, to varying levels of processing, all of which, even though they're processed differently, all of which are recognizable as the authentic drug that we would call herbal drug that we would call Dangui in Chinese medicine. Well, once you get to powders, all bets are off. Now, just for a little overview of pharmacognosy, this is how, as a science of drugs that originate from living beings and are studied to help other living beings. And I love this. You know, it came from an Italian pharmacognosist in the mid-1980s, who I never met. But to me, it embodies what we feel as herbalists is our mission in life, is to learn about the natural products that we could use in our own health and the health of our families and communities. And what I love about this is that this is this interface of science, a definition from a scientist who shares those same ideals in applying their scientific discipline in the same way that we might apply modern science and traditional medicine is exemplified in the work of Tu Yu, who's a Chinese natural products chemist who identified the compound artemisinin from wormwood, a sweet anise, in China. And she was given the Nobel Prize in medicine just in 2015 for that discovery, because artemisinin became the primary herbal drug to be used worldwide for malaria, and especially malaria that was resistant to other treatments. And I highlight her because the way she found out about artemisinin was looking in ancient Chinese texts, just doing screening of what herbs were used historically in China for malaria. And the books kept on talking about wormwood. The interesting thing is, she's being a natural products chemist, they usually do solvent extractions. And so she did these solvent extractions of the wormwood, and it didn't work. And but the books kept on saying, this is the one, this is the herb to go through. She went back to the Shen Ben Cao, where she originally learned about wormwood. And it was one of the only herbs in the entire text where it was stated that you needed to do a cold water preparation. So here's a first century herbalist or a third century herbalist, however you want to date the Shen Ben Cao, who specifically knew what type of preparation was needed to maintain the quality and deliver the medicinal effect of the botanical. So she did water extracts, and lo and behold, artemisinin was there. It lit up the assays, and the rest is history. And like I said, it became one of the world's most important discoveries with regards to the treatment of malaria, even that exists today. Now, how do we blend? Here's a question for our whole community: is how do we blend these two worlds of native herbal knowledge, wisdom, love for the earth, love for community, love for plants, with this scientific inquiry that we're required to kind of meet with modern regulatory challenges? And there are different ways to do that. The first way, obviously, is what I would say is the Pukka organic India traditional medicines model, where you send your purchasing agents to various areas of the planet of where these botanicals come from, which is what each of these companies do, and ensure that the botanicals that they're using are sustainable, have the quality, the identity that they're supposed to have. The second is for industries such as the Korean ginseng industry, where they have applied modern science, modern pharmacognosy to every aspect of Korean ginseng growth, from the makeup of the soil, the impact of rainfall, water, irrigation, nutrients, optimal harvesting times, optimal processing conditions, optimal extraction, optimal preservation and shelf stability of the product. And then they also fund a tremendous amount of research on the safety and pharmacological and clinical use of Asian ginseng, and the entire Korean government supports this. And there are journals that are only dedicated to ginseng research. So there's and here at this conference here, we have representatives from Ayush in India, and India similarly, just like the Koreans with Asian ginseng, fund and dedicate and focus a tremendous amount of research on both protecting, preserving, and promoting traditional herbal knowledge, as well as applying all the tools of science. I'm going to skip over because I don't want to go over time on you. So it is, how do we blend all of these to develop the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia? And a pharmacopoeia basically is a book of recipes that basically says, if this has this chemistry is analyzed in this way, it will deliver the benefit that you expect it to deliver. And pharmacopoeias have been around since the 16th century and before that, but codified into law since the 16th century. So our job is to choose one botanical, and then look at that botanical, everything from botany to where it's grown, when it should be picked, how it should be dried, adulterants, specific quality control guidelines that we need to know, and then all the therapeutics and safety and chemistry and analysis. What we're trying to do is we're trying to provide tools from everybody from a practitioner to a regulator to a scientific researcher. So we have the breadth of all the sustainability, efficacy, one document. This is college generations and present. And we do it publishing that have automation, looking at grades, or it comes from optoleptically and chemically, for example. And then we subject those, what we write, to a review of medicinal plant experts all around the world. That includes botanists and chemists, herbalists, growers, historians, toxicologists, pharmacologists, docs, anybody that has any knowledge of that aspect of the plant. We send these all around the world, and at the end of the day, we think they're about the most comprehensive monographs that exist. We also have an entire adulteration program that I think it's good for people to know about, mostly because it's free. All of the information that we publish under the Botanical Adulterants Prevention Program with the American Botanical Council, the National Center for Natural Products Research, is free. Just read all the information that we've gathered on adulterations. We produce Ayurvedic and Chinese herbal medicine monographs. We maintain an MOU with the Ministry of Health, Ayush Ministry of Health in India, to help co-develop Ayurvedic herbal monographs. Just Monday, we released a Yerba Santa monograph. There's never been a monograph on Yerba Santa written anywhere at any time. We got into the cannabis space and have established one of the national standards for cannabis. That's actually referenced in laws in many states. And unlike other pharmacopoeias, most pharmacopoeias don't include formula. I take that back. Most Western pharmacopoeias don't include combination products. There's very few. And so we will also want to develop, or we do develop combination products, Triphala being the first one, because that's the heart and soul of herbal medicine is formulas, at least in traditional systems, Chinese and Ayurveda. So we have many of these monographs.
Roy,
we publish texts.
Roy,
yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt, Roy, but maybe we could just wrap up. I know it's fascinating.
Absolutely, that's all right.
Forever, but thank you.
I'm there, brother. Thank you. So in that work, in addition to the monographs, we do scientific papers that we publish, and it's not done by ourselves. We have a host of advisors and reviewers. So with that, I'll just leave it and just remind us of where we come from and that connection to the plant. And we have to apply all the tools that we have of traditional herbal medicine, as well as modern quality control, just because we live in a modern world, but never forget where we come from, and we're here because of the plants. So I guess I'll leave it there. Thank you, Sebastian.
Oh, Roy, thank you so much. Apart from that being one of my favorite quotes, that was some of my favorite information I've heard. And if anyone hasn't seen the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia monographs, I'd really recommend you go and have a look. They really are some of the best in the world. And Roy, thank you to you and your organization for all the work you do, and for taking the time today to come and speak to us.
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, now we have the next talk, and we have the privilege of David Winston coming to speak to us about quality, sustainability, and clinical practice. David's a very experienced herbalist and clinician, and we welcome you, David, for the next
thank you.
minutes or so, please.
All right, so I know we're running a little late. I'll do my best to keep this as short as possible while getting everything in. And hopefully, I know Roy's connection there, being in a hotel room's tough. Hopefully this will be a little bit better. So like many of the presenters who have already spoken, I both am associated with an herb company, herbalist and alchemist, but I am also a clinician. I've been in practice for 45 years. And there are specific issues that I think really come to bear on the clinician. And some people have already talked about, the concepts of, as clinicians, we want to make sure that we are getting, fair traded herbs and sustainably harvested things, but it also affects not only us as practitioners, but our patients as well. And so I really wanted to focus in today on some of the specific issues that I think bear to as a clinician. And so, on a commercial scale, when we're really harvesting a lot of wild herbs, one of the things that I think is really important is it can deplete the native population of the herb, causing either scarcity or extinction. And of course, the first example of this, and you see this on this ancient Greek coin of silphium. Silphium was a plant in the related to the Angelicas and Asafoetida. This was a plant that was supposedly, from the literature, was an incredibly effective method of birth control. And it was so effective that they kept harvesting it and they kept harvesting it. And lo and behold, it started to become very scarce and difficult to find. At that point, they attempted to try to cultivate it, but none of their attempts were successful, and silphium became extinct. And it was probably more than 2,000 years went by before we had effective birth control again. So birth control existed through this plant called silphium. I will mention very briefly that there is a botanist who believes he has discovered some extant populations of silphium, very small populations growing in Turkey near what used to be some Greek towns, ancient Greek towns, when Greece was a massive civilization. But they're not sure because we, of course, had no botanical identification of silphium more than 2,000 years ago. So it's really hard to, 2,500 years ago, it's hard to know whether this actually is the same plant or not. But this is not a phenomenon that just occurred 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 years ago. This has also occurred in the past century. It is still recurring today. So, for instance, herbal medicine was, of course, very popular throughout the 19th century. And we have numerous plants that were over-harvested throughout the 19th century. And if we go to guaiac, that even goes back to the 16th century where it was being widely harvested. These are all plants that still exist today, but they are incredibly difficult to get. And in fact, I could say, as a person who spends a lot of time outdoors looking at and looking for plants, I don't think I've seen more in the wild more than half a dozen turkey corn Dicentra canadensis plants in my entire life. And yes, they look like Dutchman's breeches, which is a related plant, but it is not the same. This plant was over-harvested by primarily the eclectics, who were primarily herbal physicians from the 1830s through the 1930s, simply because it was an incredibly effective analgesic and painkiller. Or we have Seneca snake root, Polygala seneca, which was over-harvested and used both in orthodox medicine and by the eclectics, primarily as an expectorant. And so these are plants that, again, they still exist, but they are incredibly scarce. In the 20th century, and even to some degree before that, we see plants like American ginseng. There is one account of a wild ginseng harvester, and of course, a Jesuit priest identified American ginseng and recognized it as being very similar to the Asian ginseng based on a book he had written, read, that had an illustration of Asian ginseng. And so one of the first great exports of the newly created United States of America was American ginseng to China. And there was one harvester who recorded gathering 10,000 pounds dry weight of American ginseng. And American ginseng root is something like 84% water. So you can do the math, 10,000 pounds dry weight is a lot of plants in a 10-year period. So roughly 1,000 pounds dry weight of American ginseng a year over a 10-year period. American ginseng used to be actually a rather common plant. It's a long-lived plant. I myself have seen an American ginseng plant that was at least 70 years old, and the plant probably could live at least to 100 years. We have other plants in more modern times like Osha, Ligustum porteri, which was introduced both from native people as well as Hispanic people in the Southwest into modern herbal medicine. And the price of Osha has skyrocketed over the last 5 years, going from something like $20 or $30 a pound to $300 or $400 a pound because of scarcity. We see golden seal, lady slipper, which thankfully all American herb companies, as far as I know, pretty much agreed to stop selling back in the 1970s. So we see much less pressure on the lady slipper population. But then we have things like Helonius, which is known as false unicorn root, Camellerium luteum, which has also become a tremendously threatened species. And so how does this affect the clinician? Well, when we have scarcity of a product, this leads to, reduced amount of available, scarcity that increases the price of these things, which means it makes our medicines less affordable. If you're going to buy a wild American ginseng extract today, a tincture, you're going to pay a lot for it because the materials are so expensive. But along with increasing price, something else happens. And we all know that human nature being what it is, there are people out there who are more than happy, unfortunately, to put something else in there. And so increased price means increased risk of adulteration And with adulteration, you're often going to get either less effective medicines or ineffective medicines. And so some of the adulterants that we have seen relatively commonly over the last, let's say, 50 years, we see saffron, which is an incredibly expensive spice and medicine, but also very effective medicine, commonly adulterated with safflower. And it's not to say that safflower, Honghua, is not a useful medicine. It is. It's just not saffron. We see Echinacea angustifolia, which in the 1980s and 90s was so popular, the wild populations diminished dramatically, adulterated with things like Parthenium integrifolium. We see saw palmetto today adulterated with vegetable oil or other palm fruit extracts, which are not saw palmetto. We see slippery elm adulterated with things like rice flour. Rhodiola rosea, and of course that is, rhodiola is now on the CITES list, which means that there are whole other issues there. I will say that it is being commercially grown in Canada, which I would strongly support. But what we have seen for more than a decade is much of the rhodiola in the American marketplace was not Rhodiola rosea. It was other species of rhodiola, mostly coming from China. And while they contain the active constituents, the salitricides, they contain none of the rosavins, which are also active constituents. Or we see things like elderberry adulterated with black rice extract, or golden seal adulterated with less effective herbs like barberry or Oregon grapefruit or yellowroot xanthorrhiza. And so as a practitioner, this is a credible concern, because depending on where you are getting your herbs from, you know, there is a old saying in computer programming, garbage in, garbage out. If the program that goes into your computer is garbage, well, then what you're going to get out of that is going to be equally ineffective and useless. That is the same thing is true with herbal medicines. If we are using adulterants, if you are giving somebody slippery elm, but you're really giving them rice flour, you're not going to expect to get the same clinical benefit for your patients. So in my opinion, organically grown herbs in the proper Dao Di, also known as Di Dao, this is the proper terrain, is going to give you the most effective medicine. And someone asked a question in the chat before to Joseph, asking whether, you know, if wild plants are cultivated, do you get the same chemistry? Do you get the same medicinal effects? And the answer to that is yes and no. Sometimes, yes. So if you have a dandelion that is grown probably in multiple locations throughout the world, what you're going to get is relative consistency and activity. On the other hand, if you have plants like, for instance, there are certain Chinese plants that over the last 2 decades, they have moved growing them out of their traditional terrains, and you've seen a tremendous decrease. And in fact, I think we have that right here. We've seen a tremendous decrease in quality in herbs like Tianchi ginseng, Panax nodo ginseng. And those of you who are TCM practitioners and know Tianchi, also known as Sanchi, you know that there is no other herb more effective for stopping bleeding than Tianchi ginseng. I've had patients, women with dysfunctional uterine bleeding, who've been bleeding nonstop for years. And after several doses of Tianchi ginseng, usually, of course, in a formula with other herbs, the bleeding stops. It is remarkable how effective Tianchi is. But I can say from a company perspective, we had to stop making a Tianchi extract because we couldn't find anything that met our quality control standards, both in the sense of active constituents, but even more so, problems with herbicides, pesticides, fungicide residues, aflatoxins. And part of this is because there is a long-established practice in China of cultivating Tianchi ginseng. But as Chinese herbs have become more popular throughout the world, one of the things that's happened is large corporations have bought out a lot of the traditional farms or the accumulators, and there has been increased pressure on growing Tianchi outside of its traditional Dao Di or Di Dao areas into other areas, because once you grow Tianchi in the soil, you really can't grow it again there for probably another 15 years, 20 years. Yeah, the soil, you have to grow something else. And They have shortened the harvest time. So instead of the traditional 5 to 7 years, till harvesting, they're harvesting it in 3 years to make it grow faster, more fertilizer, more pesticides, because again, it's being often grown in a monoculture. We see the same problems with Chinese coptis, which is sort of on par with golden seal as one of the most effective berberine-containing herbs used for a range of conditions, especially antifungal, antibacterial, etc. And then, of course, there's the wonderful story of Chinese maca, whereas the Chinese some folks from China smuggled maca out of Peru and started growing it in China. And the material coming out of China was horrible. It was not grown at the right elevation. It was not processed correctly. And eventually that whole marketplace kind of collapsed. But if you were a clinician and you are using a maca instead of coming from its traditional growth area of Peru and harvested at the right time and processed in the right way, you're using this material out of China, you would have been sorely disappointed, as would your patients, in the quality and activity of that medicine. So we, as well, of course, as our patients, are deeply affected by the environment. The loss of species and diversity, whether that is soil bacteria, fungi, plants, animals, gut flora, affects the larger ecosystem as well as our personal and planetary health. So we are affected by what we breathe, what we drink, what we consume. The world around us affects us. And so sustainably harvesting, whether it be food, whether it be medicines, is really important to our overall health. I would also point out that industrialized farming, especially sort of the monoculture that tends to be practiced certainly in the US, but also throughout the world, causes a loss of topsoil, and demineralized soil is a major issue that most people do not think about. So when we look at the average American, and I can't speak to somebody in another part of the world, we look at the average American and they are deficient in macro elements, including magnesium, as well as micro elements, including zinc, selenium, boron, chromium. 60% of Americans are magnesium deficient, all right? And part of that is because the soil that the plants are grown in has been stripped of its minerals, and commercial farming is more like mining than farming. And so this affects our patients, because if you have somebody with chronic neurological issues, if you have somebody with chronic muscle spasms, bruxism, things of this nature, one of the first things that you're going to look at is what is their magnesium status. And so again, if you are eating food that is devoid of nutrients that should be there, then that's going to affect your overall health. The widespread use of herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides winds up in our food, our herbs, our water, our soil, and our air, negatively affecting our health, our patients' health, our companion animals' health, and it has significant effects on our immune function, reproductive function, neurological function, and endocrine system, as well as I mentioned before, the intestinal microbiome. You know, 90% of the DNA in your body is not you. It is bacteria living on you and in you, primarily in the lumen in the large intestine. And so, small and large, mostly the large intestine. And we are affected, as is the intestinal microbiome, by all of these compounds. And we see more and more research showing us that the widespread use of herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides has a dramatic effect on the environment and our hormonal systems. We see lots of reptiles where the males of the species are being born feminized, where they are no longer able to fertilize the eggs of the female. The average sperm count in humans and human men over the last 50 years has dropped by 50%. These are very real issues. So when we look at, again, these pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, organophosphates in herbs are common. They are carcinogens, they are hormone disruptors. American ginseng, and I can't really see that slide, it's covered over there, but we find any number of organophosphates there, and I think it was 51 other chemical residues. The herb thyme in Poland, 66% of the samples of thyme had significant chemical residues. The Chinese herb tusitzi, or dodder seed, again, is another herb that I used to use a lot. I won't touch it anymore because 70% of all the samples of tusitzi available from China had lead levels that were not slightly above acceptable lead levels. They were, 300 parts per million. I mean, really large quantities of lead. Orange peel and goji berry had very high percentages of banned pesticides in more than 50% of the samples. Ashwagandha and holy basil, again, many of the samples had aldrin, endrin, dieldrin, hexachlorocyclohexanes in them. Ginkgo leaves, 81 multi-class pesticide residues. And I don't know about you, but when I'm taking herbs, I kind of want them for their health benefits. I am not taking herbs to get all sorts of pesticide and other organophosphate residues, which have dramatic life-changing and health-changing in a negative way effects.
David, thank you so
Yes.
much. Are you able to come to a conclusion quite soon, please, with this?
Okay, well, all right. I kind of started late, but so what I would say is, in my opinion, what we want are sustainable, organically cultivated herbs or sustainable herbs that are wildcrafted. And the exception is the aggressive weedy species. And so I will just very quickly say that some of these plants, which now have taken over and countries and communities spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year trying to eradicate, learn to use them, whether we're talking about kudzu, Japanese honeysuckle, purple loosestrife, etc. These are great medicines that most people don't know how to use. And by using them, we're getting really good quality herbs, reducing the use of herbicides. And then finally, I would say seeing the earth as separate from us creates or as a commodity, creates a mindset, what is some people have called nature deficit disorder. And it separates us from the real world, from the natural world. Some people have termed that species loneliness. And I believe it leads to our feelings of disconnection, anxiety, and depression. And if you are a clinician, right now, certainly over the last 3 years, one of the things you are seeing over and over and over again in your patients is depression, anxiety, and loneliness. So I think that, again, seeing the earth as a living thing that we are a part of and respecting that and using medicines that are fresh and organically cultivated helps to heal us, not only physically and emotionally, but spiritually as well. Thank you.
Well, David, thank you for summarizing that so eloquently at the end. And we can understand why, can't we, that our mood can be so low when the natural world is suffering so much. So thank you for giving us some insights into what we can do as clinicians there. I think you said it as garbage in, garbage out, sums it up pretty well. And lovely to see you as well. And so now moving on to welcome Vicky Murray, who is an expert in sustainability, is going to share information about the review we carried out of the Herbal Alliance. And Vicky's going to tell you everything. So over to you, Vicky.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sebastian. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you all. I'm here today, as Sebastian said, to report back on a piece of work that we did here at the Herbal Alliance in the UK and Ireland, a sustainability review. I'm going to tell you what we did, why we did it, and what we learnt. And our aim is to hopefully inspire you to get involved in this project or to follow a similar process towards taking action within your herbal practitioner communities within your own regions. For anyone that missed the beginning of the day, the Herbal Alliance is a community of herbal organisations and herbalists in the United Kingdom and Republic of Ireland with a shared aim of promoting and supporting herbal medicine and herbalists. So I am going to cover what we did, why we did it now, what we found out, and most critically, the actions that we are going to move forward and how you might get involved in that. So we kicked off this project in September 22. And as a lot of people have said on, looking through the chat, some of this stuff is very overwhelming in terms of sustainability. Our key aim, and I'll talk about it in a minute, was to really think about, well, how do we cut through that overwhelm and decide what to do? So we kicked off in September. I then went through a series of discovery interviews and clinic visits with the supply and sustainability community action team members, plus a few other clinics in the UK, to understand the depth and breadth of the sustainability challenges being experienced and anticipated across our herbal profession. I also visited a number of clinics to see what was happening there on the ground. So what were people experiencing day to day in the clinics in terms of their sustainability challenges? It's important to note that a central tenet of this work was bringing in experience and views from across the different herbal traditions. So we included Ayurvedic, Western, TCM, as well as other herbal traditions. And we had a diversity of size of practitioner as well. So single person clinics attached to their own herb growing gardens, right through to larger organizations sourcing herbs from all over the world. Some people had been thinking about sustainability for decades, and some by their own ambition were very early in their journey of understanding. So the discussion got lively, with that diversity of thought and experience. It was interesting, but I was there to help facilitate and navigate the discussion, and it made our process ever the stronger. We ended up with a huge long list of challenges that had come up through those discussions, and we prioritized those. So we had a workshop in November that took all of the issues we heard about today and some more that I'll quickly talk through, and prioritize these during a series of workshops to begin to generate ideas to respond to those sustainability issues. We took those challenges and the ideas that came up through that work out to the Herbal Alliance. We did a sense check with that group and built up more ideas to take action on. We then finalized our action planning in the end of January, and here we are sharing the results of that. We finalized our action list and our priorities for the next 12 months. So we went from diagnosis of the problem to a treatment plan within sort of 3 short months. So that's what we did, but I want to take us back to why we did it. Now, first of all, the Herbal Alliance members were asking for this. So there was a survey done back in 2021, and we heard loud and clear that, yes, people cared about sustainability, but they were slightly lost about what to do about it. And as we've heard today, we're living at this critical stage of a climate and biodiversity emergency. What we do now over these next 10 years will profoundly impact the next 1,000 years. So we all have this responsibility to take action and also to be prepared for the changes that are to come. Now, for those of us that weren't in at the Zoom at the very beginning of the day, I wanted to just recap very briefly on some of the challenges and the injustices that we face. So this trajectory that we're on in terms of climate is truly horrific for the world. Parts of the world becoming uninhabitable due to flooding, wildfires, and heat stress. Now, what's so striking about this map in my eye, and this is a kind of a trajectory if we did hit 4 degrees of temperature rise, the number of people experiencing heat stress. So if you don't know what that is, that's that potentially fatal combination of heat and humidity. So these are the regions that are impacted most by heat stress. And this is a kind of 4-degree scenario. We're on track for a 2.8 degrees heating, global heating. What strikes me about this is that it's an injustice of epic proportions, because the lives of the people that are most at risk are not the ones that are responsible for this crisis. That's mainly the carbon emissions are coming from the global north. And also, if we think about this in terms of herbal sourcing, where are we sourcing from? It's the areas that are going to be impacted by this. So it's not only that sense of injustice, but we need to be aware of how this is going to impact us as a herbal industry. We need to be ready. Yes, we need to reduce our impacts. We also need to prepare our clinical practice for a future where herbs might be harder to source. Our patients will suffer, as we were listening just a moment ago, from increasing anxiety around these issues. We'll see new diseases as the temperatures change. We'll see certainly higher levels of anxiety too. So, what to do? Given the scale of the climate, ecological and social challenges that we face, the question that we wanted to answer with this work was how do we respond to that? What can we do as a Herbal Alliance next to support meaningful and urgent action on these issues? We wanted to empower Herbal Alliance members to engage in those solutions. So, when the climate crisis, social injustices, political instability, wealth hoarding, and other systemic issues overwhelm us, we come together. We connect, we feel, we heal, and we change. So this is what we did. I'm not going to go through all of these because we've heard in great depth about so many of these issues today. There's some incredible wisdom been shared today. We also touched on issues of packaging. Nobody knows what's the best packaging to use. We're all going away and doing our own research about it. These are some of the issues that came up as well as sort of remember, sustainability, environmental sustainability, social sustainability, but also financial sustainability. There was a real interesting theme that sort of bubbled up around sort of a lack of sense of abundance, particularly for small clinics and small practitioners, feeling of lack of abundance, financial abundance for themselves, which certainly trickles that down then to how they're sourcing and how they're able to source, and that then impacts the growers and collectors in the field and their incomes. So this whole sort of lack of abundance across the chain. So I'm going to show you I'm not expecting you to be able to read this, but for anyone interested in process, right? How do we get from that overwhelming feeling of, oh my gosh, there's too much to do, I'm just me, what on earth can I do about this next? This is the process we went through. We categorized a huge, those themes all had sub-themes, and we mapped them all out and looked at the importance of that issue to us as herbal practitioners. And secondly, our ability to control or do something about that. So, things that ended up in a kind of, high importance, but ability to control low, geopolitical events, war, we can't do much about that. But things that were prioritized up at the other end, we'll talk through in a moment, because that's where we collected our kind of energy towards focusing on what can we do as an alliance to respond. And we had a slight bias as well towards collective action, because we're a collective group of herbal practitioners. So here is a very simple slide of something that was a very complicated and long process to get to, but I'll talk through each of these areas, the themes that we prioritized and the actions we prioritized, what we're going to be doing next as an alliance, and what we encourage you to come and join us to get involved in. So the first was building practitioner awareness of sustainability issues and impacts. Many of the practitioners we spoke to expressed a desire to understand more about the breadth and depth of sustainability issues impacting the herbal value chain. So that's right from the field, processing through to packaging and end use. You all are one of those people, right? We're all here for a reason. We want to learn, we want to gather more information. So as an alliance, we want to develop that common understanding through our work to help provide a solid basis for action across our community. And we'll talk in a moment through the orange actions that we're going to prioritize to do next. And some of those are already underway. But the second issue in blue there, security of supply, we've heard a lot about this today. The continued availability of quality herbs was a challenge highlighted by literally everybody that I spoke to. So whether that was in an interview or a clinic visit, and a lot of you have said it today, we see many supply challenges on the horizon that we all need to be prepared for, whether that's the climate crisis, the result of the climate crisis, over-harvesting, welfare of pickers and collectors, generational, are people going to continue farming endangered species or any other issue impacting the quality of our materia medica? That was a huge issue highlighted by everybody. Another issue highlighted was this need for a deeper connection and dialogue between the herbal practitioners and their suppliers. So taking action on sustainability will require collaboration and collective effort. That's a given. That transparency was seen as a key issue here between practitioners and suppliers as a key enabler to help take action on sustainability. We need to know where our herbs are from. We need to know the challenges involved in harvesting and processing as practitioners so that we're aware of what's happening, and we need to develop those common goals for future and how we might work together. There were also some kind of thematic issues, biodiversity, the impact of sourcing organically, promoting biodiversity, guidance on how to source sustainable ingredients, how to protect pollinators. They're all identified as a key focus for herbal practitioners, as well as packaging, guidance, conflicting advice, or how to navigate that, and where to take the climate action in these unprecedented times. So those were the themes, the themes that were prioritized by the Herbal Alliance. I was working with the Supplying and Sustainability Community Action Team, so a group of representatives from the membership. This is what we prioritized together, along with feedback from a survey. And these were the actions that were prioritized then from those themes. So within kind of building practitioner awareness, we're in the process of developing a module for all herbal colleges to use as a part of their core curriculum, and that could also be used for CPD, so the continued professional development, to educate herbalists already qualified. So that's something to help all practitioners understand the key sustainability challenges and opportunities and address them. And the project will introduce a kind of harmonized approach with each core curriculum. That is the aim, and that work is kicked off, and we're hoping to launch it in September. Now, there's lots of amazing material already out there, so if you have anything that you would like to suggest that we include in that, or that you have already developed, let's not reinvent the wheel with any of this. Let's see what's out there, signpost to what's great, and keep learning together. We've also developed a sustainability and quality definition, so a common understanding what is sustainability, what we're aiming for, and that will be used as a basis for some of our other work. In response to security of supply, the Action CAT are going to develop a top 20 at-risk herbs list. So this will involve compiling a list of the top 20, the number is not yet firmed up, but the known herbs most at risk from an availability point of view, so whether that's due to overharvesting, climate events, or other reasons. For those at-risk herbs, we will be offering suggestions on alternatives for sustainable sourcing, or tips on how to make sure that what you are sourcing is sustainably sourced. In terms of building that dialogue and connection between herbal practitioners, we heard from both Erin and Alison earlier today how important this is. Asking questions of suppliers, the more we ask the questions, the more compelled they will be also to react and respond. So the team at the Alliance plan to develop an open source list of questions that herbal practitioners can use to help understand the sustainability and quality credentials of their suppliers. So if you have any ideas for these lists and would like to get involved in developing that, please do let us know. Also, we will at some point, this is a longer term goal for the Alliance, be developing a set of sourcing guidelines to help herbal practitioners source herbs in the most sustainable way. So some of the issues, so biodiversity, packaging, climate action, those will of course go into the other work, building practitioner awareness and developing that module. These are issues that will all be covered. There might not be specific actions related to them yet, but they are on their way. And if you are particularly passionate about those issues, again, do join us and get involved in developing those. And I've been thinking deeply actually about climate action, because I started off this presentation about saying, gosh, this is something, the major thing that we need to focus on, and the herbal industry's role in taking action on that, as well as doing all the usual things, switching to renewable energy, reducing our energy consumption in what we do. I strongly believe that the role of herbal practitioners, people that use herbs for people's health, is to keep people out of hospitals. These are places that are hugely carbon intensive. So the work that you do in keeping people well is already a huge contributor to climate action. So very quickly, just again on the process, because you might be thinking, what we want to do this, what might we do? Each of those themes has an action owner. Sebastian is pioneering the development of our training module. We're able to talk about that in a nutshell and focus on what the next actions might be. Each action owner will take this action forward and report back to the Sustainability and Supply Action team regularly, and we will be keeping each other held to account for progress. Just before I wrap up, just also wanted to mention that as part of this process, we developed a vision. What are we aiming for with this work? And again, I'm not expecting you to be able to read this, but from right to left, it takes us through all the steps, right from growing to transporting our herbs to using them in our clinics and their use and disposal. And we came up with we called it the dream. What would a socially and environmentally sustainable herbal value chain look like? And this is work in progress. Again, if you've got strong feelings on this, please let us know either now in the chat or afterwards, because it really helped us anchor our idea generation, our themes for action, and what we wanted to collectively, when we did that and anchored it in what we wanted to collectively achieve. So if you're interested in getting involved, please do let us know any feedback on this work. If you would like to replicate this work in your region, so discover the themes that are most relevant for you, or build on some of the themes that we've done and tailor them, please do let us know. And if you want to get involved in this ongoing program of work, I'm giving you Sebastian's email. I was brought in to facilitate this work, but the supply cat are the ones that are taking it forward with a bit of my support too. But do get in touch, and please do let us know in the chat if you've got any further ideas as well. So just a thank you to our funders, a thank you to everybody that was involved. I also want to acknowledge who was not in the room and who was not part of the process. And we all need, I think, to find better ways of bringing in and centering our work in the growers and collectors of our herbs to help directly address climate and social injustice. We're sourcing organically, we're doing that, yes, because pesticide residues make our medicines less effective, but also they directly impact the lives of people that are spraying in the fields. So we do this together, And if we can find ways of bringing in groups that represent our collectors and growers, if you've been involved in projects that do that well, again, I would love to hear more from you, because we need to be inviting them to the table. So thank you. This is me. If you would like to get in touch with me, there's my details. I'll put them in the chat too. But Sebastian, that was everything I had to say about that process that we went through with the Herbal Alliance. Do let me know if you've got anything you wanted to add.
Thank you, Vicky, very much for running through that great work you've done for us and set the Herbal Alliance on, I think, a pioneering path towards sustainability for the herbal community. So that was excellent. And I'm now going to swiftly pass over to Anne. And I apologise, Anne, for cutting your bit a little bit short, but we've got 22 minutes. So I hope we can do everything in that time.
Yes. So now, so I started the Sustainable Herbs program really kind of directly thinking the focus would be the herb community. And I realized I needed to understand the industry and the challenge that we're faced by companies trying to do this work. And that's what today was really about, bringing those voices to the herb community. And now, sort of inspired by Vicky's amazing presentation and super inspiring work, what we're going to do is turn it over to you all, and we're going to go into breakout rooms and really talk about, okay, we've heard all of this kind of daunting and inspiring information today. What can we all do to be better stewards of the plants and the people producing the products that, as companies, as practitioners, as individuals, we depend on? What can the herb community do to have a stronger voice? And that is really, you know, Herbal Alliance is a real leader in kind of thinking this through and saying we need to take some concrete actions. How can we all kind of, what can we do to support that, generate new action? And what tools and resources do you need to do this? So what we're going to do, we have 10 minutes and 3 people in a breakout room, and we'll put the questions in the chat so you can see them. There are 2 questions. Based on what you've heard today, what is the next thing or things the herb community, practitioner community can do to support sustainable and ethical sourcing? And a second, what support, resources, tools are needed to do that? So there'll be 3 of you in the group. Please make sure everybody has time to share. And then we'll come back and have one of you share what you came up with in the chat. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for doing that. So now if you could just take a second and have one person from your group pop into the chat. What the main action items that emerged for you, the things that the community could do, and what resources might help with that. We have one in there, think globally, act locally. Third-party testing. Pay collectors an equitable rate so they are able to make a living sourcing responsibly. So we'll let people pop those in and you can read them. Continue education. Importance of prioritizing brands, local and sustainable brands. Comic book, David Winston suggested to empower youth to change as well as adults. Good idea. So we will compile these, and when we share the recording, we'll share this and try and, you know, kind of frame out some key actions to move forward. And then I wanted to now ask you all just to take a moment, not reading the chat for a second, just think back into your own experience today and everything you've heard and how it's feeling in your body. And bring the plants and the people that we started the conversation with. And then invite in, so what is one action that you can take that's really manageable that you can take in the next week, in the next few weeks, not more than the next month, to really move forward with what you've heard today. Just take a moment to let that arise. Now I want to invite you to share that one action in the chat. Have conversations with my community at the dinner table, with a friend on a walk, and remind them they are powerful and can affect change. Connection, education, service. Here's one, I like this concrete. Reach out to one of my wild collectors just to ask how things are going and to see ways that we might be able to support them better this year. Connect colleagues with the key takeouts from today's conference. Share this knowledge. Read a few updated publications. So connect, share, thank a grower harvester. So these are great. Thank you all. And I like this one. Let more people know about the Sustainable Herbs program and stay connected with those who are growing for us. So I'll let you all look over those and we will share them again when we share the recording. We'll share the recording of this. It might be in right after May 10th because I'm traveling next week. And I want to thank all of the speakers so much for your time. I want to thank all of you who have participated and for contributing to this work through purchasing a ticket. I'm really grateful. Sebastian, from the beginning, felt really strongly he wanted it not to be supported by companies, and we really wanted it to be available for a range of prices. And so thank you all for acknowledging that. And Sebastian, I want to invite you to say a closing word or two.
Yes, well, I'd follow that up by saying thank you to all of you that have attended and given your time, and the chat's been great to hear everyone's passion and enthusiasm. You know, it's a tough subject, isn't it? We're really looking down at our herbal soul, if you like, and what we can do to protect and help the future thrive. So big thank you to you, Anne, as well, for all the work you do at the Sustainable Herbs Programme. I'm sure if you haven't read this book, you should. Anne's brilliant book on the business of botanicals. And yeah, it's really quite moving. So thank you all very much for your insights, and let's really work together. My lessons from working with the Herbal Alliance is there are many levels of knowledge, but everyone's willing to or enthusiastic to help change. We really need to work together. There's not anything one company or one group can do together. And I really feel that as professional clinicians, we have got a sort of square-rooted power, if you like, that is above and beyond the scale of our purchasing. And we've got like a moral, maybe spiritual authority to speak about how plants should be harvested and protected, and that we should prescribe in that way. So thank you all so much for attending today, and yeah, take care.